Can you reiterate my question? Just reiterate my question. Let me see if you even remember it.
Given that a hypostasis is the two that are in union, and the two in union are the body and soul, and the soul can change and the body can change, how come you can't say that the person changes? That's what you're saying.
No.
No,
That wasn't my question.
I'm steel manning your argument. I'm steel manning it.
But I'm not even going there yet. I want to establish this.
Okay.
What does the whole man have that his parts in union together don't have? If you use your soul through your body. Now with this, because I didn't get to why I brought that up. I didn't get to why I brought that up. If the soul is working through the body, the soul's working through the body.
Yeah.
And the soul is working through the body to alter the body. And you yourself agreed that thinking is itself a change to the soul. Then when SIIG goes to amputate himself, he's using both his body and soul in union, and SIIG himself is his body and soul in union. Therefore, SIIG is changing himself. He's changing, and both things compose you.
But the problem is that you're talking about here is not that the thing is changing itself, but different things are changing different things.
SIIG would be changing himself because he's constituted of both of those things that are changing.
SIIG would not be changing himself in this instance.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. Are changing different things pertaining to SIIG.
No, it's not, because both of those things compose SIIG.
About my hand.
Both of those things compose SIIG, and both of those things are changing.
It doesn't matter. The composition itself has nothing
to do with
whether or not the things provided.
It has everything to do, because that's the one thing I'm talking about.
You are making the fallacy
yes,
of
it
composition
does.
because you're saying.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are, because you're saying what is true for
No,
the
I'm not. Because
listen, that's what you're doing.
I'm saying I'm granting that it's an individual nature.
Okay. But you're not granting that the term him is person. So one of the hymns is person, the other of the hymns in its reference is nature. So he joins.
So you have two distinct hymns.
No, you have two distinct understandings of him. Yes.
By spatial change.
Yeah.
All I mean is that you were in one location spatially, and you're no longer in that location. You're in another location, which is non-identical to that first location. That's what I mean by spatially change. And I'm saying, because you said this isn't predicated to the nature, it's predicated to the person. Given this definition I gave, did the person spatially change, yes or no?
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to do something in the back, so I apologize, okay? The answer of this question, like I said, is going to depend on the definition of change. What you've given me is the definition of different spaces or different spatial locations. So literally being in one spatial location and then not being in another spatial location. But what that doesn't tell me is what constitutes being in one spatial location and not being in another spatial location as change. You understand that?
Granting, okay, would you say if I'm in one location and I'm no longer in that location, I'm in another, would you at least in your system think that's a change in space?
That's a change in space.
Okay, so that's what I mean by spatial change.
No. I asked you to repeat that. So I said, is that a change in space? That's what I said.
Yeah, would you think that's a change in space?
Well, being in one spatial location and then you're saying, what? Okay, let me try and do this for you, right? So I think you're saying, because I don't want to like lambast here or actually be an arsehole. I'm just trying to do my best to make sure that I understand you here. You're saying that at time t1, you are in, let's say
one
X,
space,
right? And then in time t2, you are in another space.
Yes, and those two spaces are non-identical.
Right. So
and they cannot be both true at the same time.
Right. The thing that's being attributed to the change would be the thing that directly and intimately is doing the particular thing. So the human body on one level would be, the thing that is being edited, but it's being edited by the thing that causes it to walk, which would be the humanity of Christ. So not humanity, the divinity. I say divinity again.
But you said, with that in mind, you said this actually isn't predicated to the human nature. It's rather predicated to the person. You mind if I give you a quote from John of Damascus on this specifically?
I'm not too.
It'll make sense.
I'm not too concerned with the Damascus quote because we're trying to figure with the philosophy like you tried to do before. Remember when we were on TikTok?
Well, it uses the terms I'm using. Let me show you.
I understand, but like my point is I don't want to use something theory laden because we don't agree on the terminology that we should use. For example, we don't even agree on a counting method, right? So This is one of the things that are actually being contested.
Well, I want to know if you agree with this.
Okay, look,
Right.
but
Because
I'm not gonna,
it's pretty
look,
simple. Not heavy terms are being invoked. Would you agree with this citation from John Damascus? I'll put it in the side chat.
where is this
He says,
from, John?
for when one composite hypostasis comes to be out of two natures, the ones and the others, that is, the natural and hypostatic idioms of the divine and human natures become constitutive of the same hypostasis.
Is that a
Would you
definition
affirm?
is that a definition of change, Agen? Remember, because we're now moving away
No.
from
I'm just saying
intrinsic
for
change
now.
to something different. Because if we're done
For
with
now, do you
if
agree
we're
with
done
this
the
definition?
intrinsic change argument, then we can move to something different.
No. It's tied, but I want to see if you agree with
But
this
it's
citation
not the same,
first.
though, is it?
I want to know if you agree with it,
That's
though.
fine. I just want to know if it's the same arg, because I don't want to be debating.
It's the
two different
same
args.
argument.
Okay, if it's the same,
the same
argument,
argument.
does this give you your definition of change?
It'll give you an understanding of what I mean by
So
constitutive
it
properties,
doesn't give
predicating
you-
to the
so It
person.
doesn't give you the definition.
Dude, do you agree with the quote or not?
I'm not saying whether I agree with the quote or not. If it's irrelevant to.
Just answer. Just answer.
I don't have to answer something that's irrelevant, Agen. We both know that.
It's totally irrelevant. I'll show you how it's
You just
relevant
said-
when I tie it
Sorry,
in.
you said irrelevant. You mean relevant, right?
No, I said irrelevant.
Oh,
It is relevant.
Okay, so it isn't relevant if it's not demonstrating an account of change.
It will be. You'll see.
It won't be if it doesn't.
I
Does it
just want to
give a definition
understand
of
this
change?
very simply. Do you believe the natural and hypostatic idioms of the two natures are constitutive of the same hypostases?
Again, the nature of whether they are constitutive or not has nothing to do with whether change is being defined.
I'm going to get into change later. Just for now, do you
No,
affirm
because
this?
That's the thing that we're talking about now.
It is. You'll see.
So then it's not change.
Just answer the question. Do you agree with John of Damascus when he says that the natural and hypostatic idioms are constitutive of the same
I don't have
hypostases?
to agree with it if it's irrelevant to the point. It's not. Can you actually just say...
It is.
Okay, could you show how it's relevant to the point then, Agen?
Okay, because if you affirm Damascene's view of an hypostatic constitution, and you already affirmed that there is intrinsic change on the human nature, but then you also agree it has to be predicated to the person, by necessity, you would have to say that the person necessarily changed intrinsically.
Sorry, repeat that?
Based on the understanding of Damascene, that the natural and hypostatic idioms are
Yeah.
constitutive of the same hypostases via his n-hypostatic model, and you already granted that it's true of the humanity. It's one of its properties that it is subject to flux and change, and granting even spatial change via walking. If you affirm that all of that has to be constitutive of the same hypostases, you must be say it's constitutive true of of the word. So if it's true of the word, then the word, insert the human property, would be true of
I
him.
don't actually think even necessarily that's the case, because that's not a definition of change. That's you giving an assumption of what change means and then pumping it into
Okay.
John of Damascus.
Why don't we do this?
So with that
Why don't we
being
do this?
said, Agen,
What's
one
your
second.
definition of change?
Could you give... No, it's not my question.
But let's make it easy now, because
It's
if
not
I
my
give you a definition of
it's not
change,
my
you're not going to like
definition-
it.
It's not my definition of change.
Do you want to give yours, or do you want me to give mine?
It's not my question. I want you to give a definition of change.
Okay. If I give you a definition of change, are you going to agree with it or disagree with it, or how is it going to go?
Depends if the definition is something that actually is tenable for
Okay.
the question at hand. So not spatial
the
change,
act-
definition of change.
It's the act or instance of making something different, and between those two statuses, there are non-identity.
So the act of making something different?
Yes, and then between those two things,
okay.
so how it was before and how it was after, there's a lack of identity.
Okay, so can something make itself be different? In your
Well,
under this
whether it's
definition-
made by him by itself or whether it's made by another,
I'm just asking
definition
whether,
of change
I'm asking
here-
whether or not it can, because I want to see the extent of
it
its
can make
definition.
itself different. Yes,
So
it can
things-
make itself
so things
different.
can change themselves.
They can make themselves change. Yes.
Okay, so things can change themselves, because your definition of change, and actually we can do this, right? Repeat your definition so I can demonstrate what you're saying, because I can
Okay.
share my stream as well if you want.
But my definition of change,
Yeah.
it's the act or instance of making or becoming different or making something different. And between how it was before and how it was after, there is a lack of identity.
Okay. What it was and what it is there. Sorry. Is a lack of identity. Okay.
Mhm.
This kind
So that's going to be the
this
definition of
seems-
change.
So this seems to fall under some Parmenidean objection, right? And the reason I say that, Agen, is because the thing that is causing the change is the thing that is changing in question.
It could be the thing causing itself to change, something else causing it to
But the
change. My
thing
definition
but
doesn't
the
care.
thing that's causing the change, right, is the thing that's being changed.
It
So
could be.
say
That's
for
not my
example,
definition. Doesn't cover that.
your definition does, because you haven't distinguished whether or not a thing can do this thing that you've just said.
It's like, for example, if I give you a definition of like eating, someone can put food in your mouth and you can feed yourself.
Yes.
My definition doesn't care about that.
So
when I give you the
eating-
definition
your
of change,
definition-
either
your
you can change
definition-
yourself or another can change you.
So your definition isn't stance dependent. Your definition is stance dependent. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. By stance dependent, I mean it's going to rely on some sort of disposition that you have towards the thing we're talking about. When you gave your eating example, you said that a person could feed you or you could feed yourself, right? The problem is the mouth, let's say the tongue itself, or the particular action of swallowing is not being done by something in isolation. Something else is acting on the tongue, the mouth, the hand.
Again, I already told you my definition.
So your definition. This is, I'll just make this easier for you. I do not think a thing can change itself, a thing that exists in reality. I think a thing that exists in reality that undergoes change changes by reason of something else. So when I say that Christ is walking, if we wanted to have a more fine-grained idea of what that looks like, I'm saying that Christ is using the human body to perform the action of walking, and so the human body is directly undergoing the change, which is a property of the human nature, but it is the person that is enacting that particular act. There's no issue there.
Cool. SIIG, can you change yourself?
Can I change myself? No.
You can't change yourself.
No,
okay.
Something that isn't the principle of that change is changing me. That's the issue.
Okay. So let me ask you this question.
Go ahead.
If you amputated your arm, did you change yourself?
Did I change
Like you cut off your arm?
Again, by myself, do you mean the arm that's being cut off?
You. The fullness of you. Did you change yourself when you cut off your arm?
Sorry, again, what do you mean by me again?
SIIG. The whole SIIG.
That doesn't tell me. SIIG, me, and
the complete SIIG.
Are the same
SIIG's
thing.
Body and soul.
That doesn't tell me anything about what you mean. Okay, here, there you go. Did SIIG change SIIG's body? That's what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay, SIIG's body and SIIG aren't exactly the same thing.
Good.
Okay,
can SIIG's soul change? Can SIIG's soul change SIIG's soul by thinking of something?
Okay, so again, the soul is one thing. The intellect, which is an aspect of the soul, is what's undergoing the change, not the entire soul.
Okay, so not the entire soul. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me make this a little bit more clear.
Maybe.
Would you agree that you are a composite of your body and soul?
That I'm a composite of my body and soul? Sure.
Yes.
But again, this doesn't give me a definition of change,
Good.
Agen.
Good.
Because
If
we're
you're a
trying to
composite
establish
of your
a definition
body,
of change.
if you're a composite of your body and soul,
Yes.
if your soul can change itself,
yes,
and your body can change itself, can SIIG change himself?
Again, that's not something that I agree to. The reason I said yes is so that you can continue. You need to establish that something
You said
can change
yes.
itself.
You said yes, but you didn't mean it. Did I just hear that right?
I like the way that people say okay and okay. That doesn't mean that I'm
No,
saying
you said yes. You agreed to what I said.
No, I was not agreeing. Like I told you.
No, what do you mean by no? Or do you actually mean no this time?
No, I don't mean okay. When I say no this time,
No or
I
yes?
mean
You
that
just
I
said
am
no. Did you mean
negating a
yes?
particular thing. All I'm doing is
Okay,
I'm using
when you negated it, did you actually mean it? Because I can't believe anything you say now. Because apparently you just retract everything.
I don't retract anything. Okay, I've used.
You just said I said yes, but I didn't mean it.
And I'm actually being pretty clear in these linguistic conventions. A lot of people use the term yes in this way. But if you want to stick on defining yes and being sophistic, you can. Now, when it comes to the idea of the soul changing, you still need to establish how the soul itself is changing itself. You haven't established that yet.
Does the soul ever change at all?
The soul can undergo change, yes.
It can. Who changes it?
The thing that enacts the particular act. So God can change.
Give me an
the
example
soul.
of a soul changing.
When you think, the person uses the aspect of their soul to think.
So the soul can make itself change.
No, it does not.
Is thinking from the soul or from who? Is someone thinking for you?
No, again, the soul isn't identical to your hypostasis, is it?
But I'm asking specifically, can your soul change your soul?
No, you need to establish that it can.
You just said yes. You said a soul can change when you think of something.
I said a soul.
Who's doing the thinking?
The person is doing the thinking, not the soul.
Okay, is the person okay? Let me speak of it this way.
Mhm.
Is the particular soul, when it thinks,
Using the term
is the particular soul
using
enacting
the
change
term-
on itself?
Using the term particular doesn't give any more semantic content for what we're talking about.
Okay,
So
I'll
when
make it
we're
easier.
talking about-
If you
again, if I
if
could
you
just
agreed
answer
that
the
SIIG,
question again, right? Because the problem
if you
is
agreed
the
that
reason why
SIIG,
we're butting heads is come on.
the reason why we're butting heads is because you just keep retracting everything.
I'm not retracting
But anyways,
anything. What
because
I'm
you
telling
agreed,
is very
because
clear.
you agreed, because you agreed that SIIG is composite of his body and soul,
Mhm.
and this person can change his soul, and this person can change his body, it must follow that SIIG can change SIIG because he's a composite.
No, it would not follow that. It would mean
Yes,
that
it would.
No, it would
Because
not.
you
It would
agreed
not.
that the person can change
In
his
order
body by
for- no,
amputating,
if
and you
SIIG
agreed
is
that the person
entire-
can
it
change
does
his
not-
soul
it
by
does not
thinking.
follow, and I'll tell you why.
It does.
Because no, it doesn't. Even if you syllogized it, it wouldn't follow. If you wrote it out, write
It would.
out. Okay, write out a syllogism. We can all work
I'm not
out
about to
together.
write out a
There
syllogism
you
for
go,
this
'cause
tiny
you
point.
can't
If I
show
am going
that
to
it
write out a
actually
syllogism,
follows. Now,
if
to
I am
continue
if I
in
am
what
going to
I'm
write a
saying,
syllogism,
Agen, because you've been speaking for some time now.
if I am
When it
if I am
comes
going to write a
what's
syllogism,
being said, hey, look, when it comes to what's being said, you again are trying to identify that this thing, SIIG, changes itself. Now, again, this is all in context to demonstrate that I affirm change on the part of God the Word as the hypostasis when God the Word dies or when God the Word walks. The problem with
Yeah.
this, and this is written, it doesn't. The problem with this is when you say, right, explicitly that a thing can change itself without giving a reason for that or an account for that, and not even to jargonize.
I gave you the account.
You did not give an account. No.
I did. You agreed that the person of a man is constituted by body and soul,
True.
and that the person can change his body, and that the person can change his soul.
That doesn't
Therefore,
mean
the person can change the person.
No, it does not follow that.
Yes, it does, because you
No.
granted that the person is the composite of a body and a
That's a fallacy
soul.
of composition. What is true for the whole?
It's not a fallacy of composition.
What is true for the parts is not going to be true for the whole.
Okay, so what does the whole
Okay.
have, the whole
Hold on,
man
hold on, hold on,
have
hold on.
that the
So,
parts
wait,
don't
wait,
have
wait,
in
wait,
union?
Wait, hold on. I just want to be very clear, right? Do you agree that what is true for the parts is not always going to be true for the whole?
For the body and
That's
soul
a
in their
fallacy of
union,
composition.
for the body and their soul in union, whatever is true of the body and soul in union is true of the person.
Okay,
And I can
so
give you a
again-
patristic citation on
so
that from Justin Martyr.
But again, in union, and this is really important, when a particular arm is cut off, there is nothing being affected on the soul. The
But
soul
again,
has not
you're
undergone
composite
any
of body and
change.
soul.
That
You're
doesn't
composite
matter.
of body and
In
soul.
order
You're
for-
composite of
again,
body and soul.
the
So
only
your person
time a
changes your
person
body,
in-
and your
the
person
only
changes
time
your
in
soul.
which a hypostasis is affected, for example, is when it dies or when it's created. But the hypostasis
give you a
can
quote.
undergo other changes that aren't on the part of the hypostasis, but are on aspects of the hypostasis before you interrupt. When
But you
say
affirm that it's
what is
composite-
true of the
Okay,
parts
I'ma just send
is
you the
also
quote.
true of the whole. That doesn't matter.
I'm
Quote
gonna
When
show
say
you. I'm
what
gonna
is
show you a
true
quote
of the
from.
parts and what's true of the whole, you are committing a
Hold up.
fallacy of composition.
Watch. Justin Martyr says in his On the Resurrection.
Are you?
He
you're not even
says,
listening
if
to my
then
point.
neither of these is by itself man, but that which is made up of the two together is called man. And God has called man to life and resurrection. He has called not a part, but the whole,
Yes,
which
because
is
it's
the
body
soul and
and
body.
soul. Yes.
Good.
Which
Good.
means
So if the
that
body
both-
and the soul
so in
together,
order-
if the
yeah.
body and the soul together in union make up the whole, and the whole can change his body, and the whole can change the soul, then the whole can change the whole.
Well, hold on. No. Because who is
Yes,
doing the
yes, yes.
resurrection- No.
Otherwise, you have to demonstrate a predicate that exists in the person that doesn't exist in the parts in union.
This particular citation that you just gave, you gave Justin Martyr, and you said, if then neither of these is by itself man, but that by which is made up of the two, it together is called man. God has called man to life and resurrection. He is called not a part, but the whole, which is the soul and the body.
Which
Who
is what? So
let me-
it's reducible to the soul and body.
Let me do this. Who exactly is enacting the change on the body and soul? Is it the body and soul itself, or is it God?
The body and the soul in union when you cut off yourself or when you think?
Who is doing the? Who is being resurrected? The body and the soul, or God?
God is doing the resurrecting here, but I'm
the body
specifically
and the soul,
showing.
the body and the soul
I'm
aren't
specifically
resurrecting
showing.
themselves.
I'm
God is
showing you
resurrecting
specifically
body
the
and soul.
example.
All you've
I'm showing you this.
demonstrated is
I'm showing you the
someone-
specific
Hold on, hold on.
example of
All
you
you're doing
amputating
is
yourself and
demonstrating
thinking of doing
that
it.
Someone changes something else. You have not shown a thing changing itself, and this citation refutes you. You've just shown a citation that refutes you, Agen, by demonstrating
Dude,
that God.
He's
by
the whole
demonstrating
point. I'm
that
showing this
God-
quote.
Hold on, Agen. I haven't finished. By demonstrating that God resurrects body and soul, it demonstrates that God is doing something. It is changing both the body and the soul, which is why the person changes, because everything pertaining to the person changes, not just one part. Because it's not just one part, like body, or one part, like soul, that gets resurrected, but both. So, you need to show me where a father of the church affirms that a thing can change itself. It doesn't say that.
Okay, I'm gonna explain one more
Wait,
time because you
second.
misunderstood
Before
why I
you
brought
go,
that
let me
quote.
use the bathroom quickly, and then I'll come back. Is that okay?
Okay, go ahead.
All right,
Take your
guys.
time.
I'm gonna be back in 2
Yeah, man. Do your thing.
God bless you guys. I'll be back. All right, I'm back. What's up? I am back. Sorry, guys. I had to take some time to come back. You know what I mean? Am I gonna? All right. Let's continue the fold. No, I'm kidding. What's up, guys? Oh, maybe my Wi-Fi is bad. Can you guys hear me? Chat, can you hear me? For those of you that are in the Discord, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear. We can hear you on the stage at least.
Yeah, you're clear for us.
All right, cool. Maharaga, are you there?
Oh,
Maho. Okay. SIIIG running. No, guys. I'm a boy. Okay. I'm a boy. I need a pee. I have to. But yeah,
Sig,
please.
can you hear us?
say, can you hear us? Hello?
Schoolboy, of course I can hear your golfer voice. Of course I can, brother.
Can you hear Agen?
Can I hit? No, I can't. Agen, you're gonna have to leave and come back, mate.
You can't hear Agen?
Agen, can you say something?
Yeah,
Can
we
you
can hear him.
us, Agen?
Okay.
Sig, can you?
Yo, you want me to leave and come back?
Sure. Yeah, that'd probably be better.
Okay. Guys, I'm running away. I'm running away for the argument. Oh, my mic is low. Is the deal
Let's see. Get Sig up here.
He's gonna keep making this like change argument. Hello. Am I fine?
You're good.
Hello, can you hear me?
Girl, I don't mind.
You can't hear Agen?
Yeah.
Hello?
I can hear Agen now.
You can?
Okay, SIIG.
Yo.
Given the composition of the body and soul being the whole man,
Yeah.
when the body and soul are in union,
Yeah.
what does the whole have that the body and soul doesn't?
So the whole itself is referring to what makes up a human nature, but the particular hypostasis is what we're talking about. When SIIIG
Yes.
is being okay, but the hypostasis isn't identical to either soul or body, is it?
I'm saying both of them in
Yeah,
union.
yeah.
What does the whole have that the parts don't have?
Hold on, yeah, but the whole is referring to the nature, not the hypostasis.
I'm talking about the hypostases.
Okay, is the hypostasis the body and soul composite? Is that it?
In union, yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be dependent on a particular definition, but I don't think that's actually how hypostasis is used for human beings.
Okay, I can give you a quote from Epiphanius, who says there's a hypostasis of man made from the hypostasis of body and the hypostasis of soul.
Okay,
Given
so-
that understanding, would you say
so
that the
again-
whole is nothing else but the two
Alright,
parts in
so
union?
Again, so when you are using the particular idea of hypostasis, you are just quote mining Epiphanius to establish this particular view. Now we can go through Epiphanes.
Dude, every question I've asked, you just never answered.
I do answer your questions, but I answer them in the way
You're not
that we
answering.
can actually get. Yes, because I'm not going to just assume.
I asked an easy
critique.
question, dude.
Yeah,
I asked
you
an easy
asked it-
question.
No, not necessarily. Okay. Even if I
Can you
let me
reiterate
do-
my
let me-
question?
let me do-
Just
let me do this.
reiterate my question. Let me see if you even remember it.
Given that a hypostasis is the two that are in union, and the two in union are the body and soul, and the soul can change and the body can change, how come you can't
No,
say
no,
that
no.
the
No,
person
no.
changes?
No, no,
That's
no.
what you're saying.
No, no, no.
No,
That wasn't my
I'm
question.
steel manning your argument. I'm steel manning it.
But I'm not even going there yet. I want to establish this.
Okay.
What does the whole man have
Mm-hmm.
that his parts in union together don't have?
That the parts in union together don't have. So the parts
Yeah.
in union together are not just going to be the body and the soul, but the body and the soul as it pertains to the hypostasis. The same way that any body-soul
Okay.
composition isn't just going to be identical to another body-soul composition, but what makes the body-soul composition of SIIIG
Exactly.
and the
Good.
body-soul composition of Agen different is the fact that there is a hypostasis that grounds.
I'm talking about
both of those.
SIIG.
Okay.
Talking about SIIG.
But SIIG,
Is does the whole SIIG have a property that the parts of SIIG don't have in union?
So again, there isn't a I can actually grant this. Watch this. I will grant that particular view. But the problem is there isn't a time where the whole SIIG edits the whole SIIG. Is there?
Okay. But if let me give you an example actually. For any action of SIIG to do through his body, what is needed?
What is needed
Yeah. What is needed for SIIG to do any action through his body?
through his body? Oh, I think you
Yeah.
mean like you use your soul to do your body. That's what you're trying to say. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
So with
If
that
you
being
use your
said,
soul
hold
through your
on,
body.
hold on, I haven't
Now
even
with this,
finished. I
with
haven't
this,
finished. I haven't
because
finished.
I didn't get to why I brought that up.
I didn't finish.
I didn't get to why I brought that up.
But
If the
go ahead.
soul is working through the body, the soul's working through the body,
Yeah.
and the soul is working through the body to alter the body,
Mhm.
and you yourself agreed that thinking is itself a change to the soul, then when SIIG goes to amputate himself, he's using both his body and soul in union, and SIIG himself is his body and soul in
But again,
union.
that
Therefore,
going
SIIG
to
is
be-
changing
no,
himself.
That's an equivocal usage of using the term in union. Now, again, when you are using the term in union, you are saying that all that is aspectival of the body and all that is aspectival of the soul are actually being combined together. But what's going on in this particular action is only one aspect of the soul and one aspect of the body are, even under your granted sense, are being talked about in union. And that is particularly the mind or the intellect and then the hand that chops. But what's not being
And both
engaged
are
the
changing in
legs.
this, right?
But the problem is they are changing by reason of something else, which would be the aspect of the soul changing the aspect of the body. There is nothing that is part of the aspect of the soul in this instance of change that is actually being edited or modified, right?
Actually,
The
yeah,
thing
because
does
you
not
said
change
if you
itself.
think there's a change.
Yes, but the
You said if you
action-
think there's a
but the
change, so
action-
both would
but
be
the
changing
action
here.
the action of thinking is being enacted on by the aspect of the soul. But the soul itself isn't actually
Good.
undergoing the change. The aspect of the soul is. The same way when I cut off my arm,
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
my
whoa, whoa,
foot
whoa, whoa,
isn't
whoa. The
undergoing change,
aspect
and
of
I'm
the
not
soul
going
is
to allow you to
changing, but
interrupt me.
not the soul?
I'm going to basically finish with what I'm saying. I said, before you
What?
interrupted me, the same way that when an aspect of my body is changing, it does not mean all aspects of my body are undergoing the same change. For example, if I cut my arm off, my foot's not actually undergoing the change. My arm is.
But
Now,
that's not what I'm.
but that
I don't
is-
care
but
about
that- but
all of
that's
you
being-
changing.
But that's being responded to. Again, when a change is being enacted, it's going to be on the part of the thing that is receiving the action of what's going on. However,
But again, I'm not
I didn't
trying to
interrupt
argue
you,
all of
Agen.
SIIG is
Agen, I
changing.
didn't interrupt you, man. I'm sorry. I'm going to continue, right? You need to demonstrate that a thing changes itself. So in your analogy, the thing that's being changed is the arm. Can the arm change itself?
No, what I said was
There
the
you
thing that's
go.
being
Could
changed
you
is your
please
body.
demonstrate-
What I said, the thing that's changing is your body and your
the
soul
def-
because
and-
you have to think to amputate
the
yourself. So you have
definition
two
of
things
the body-
changing and both things compose you.
But the problem is that you're talking about here is not that the thing is changing itself, but different things are changing different
No,
things.
your
Yes.
SIIG would be changing himself because he's constituted
SIIG
of both
would
of
not-
those things
SIIG
that are
would not be
changing.
changing himself in this instance.
Yes, he
Different
is.
things pertaining
Yes,
to
he
SIIG
is.
are changing different things pertaining to SIIG.
No,
the same
it's
way
not,
that my
because
hand
both
is
of those
changing
things
another
compose
part
SIIG.
about my hand.
Both of those
Or my
things
hand is
compose
changing
SIIG
my
and
other
both of those
hand.
things are
It
changing.
doesn't matter. The composition itself has nothing
It
to
does
do with
matter.
whether or not the thing is
It
providing
has
act.
everything to do because
No,
that's the
it
one thing I'm
doesn't.
talking talking
You are
about.
making the fallacy
Yes,
of
it does.
composition because you're saying.
No,
that what
I'm
is-
not.
Yes, you are, because you're saying what is true for the
No, I'm
past
not, because
is
you
also
you
true
failed
for
to
the
show
whole Agen. You need to
you failed to
demonstrate
show
how what is true
you
for
failed
the
to show
All
what
right,
past
guys,
predicates the
is
guys,
whole
also
guys,
true
has.
for the
guys,
whole
guys,
Agen. You got to do
guys,
it.
guys. Let's chill, relax. All right, listen,
We've been
Sig.
talking about this
Let him
song
go.
for 27 minutes
I know it's
I
because of
understand.
you.
because you're not able to demonstrate your account
Let's
of
do a quick
change.
little reset. Let's reset. Let's just take it because we don't need to over talk and it's not gonna work.
All right,
Nothing's gonna
Completely
you
happen.
fine.
mind
So
you mind you mind, Gabriel, if we change the topic because we've been on here for 20 minutes,
if
or
Sig
do you want me
agrees
to
with
keep,
that, that's fine. If Sig is okay
All
with
right, I
that,
have
that's cool.
something. I do
or do you
have
want to keep
something that I
talking about the
wanna-
same thing, Sig?
I do have something that I want to bring up because this is something that I think is actually sort of going to be like fundamental with this idea of essence. A lot of the
Well,
time-
you've made all the questions. Can I make the questions now?
you made a question for the past 30 to 45 minutes actually. The same time I
And
actually
before
did.
that, you did it for an hour.
No, before that I did it for 45. And you've done it for 45
Okay, then give me
too.
10 minutes. No, I
you've
haven't.
done it
You
for-
said
yes, you
30.
have. You've done it for 27 minutes in this aspect, but even before
And
when
then
you
you
were
said
on the
40.
TikTok live stream, because I was out of the time.
Hey, Agen, what? Hold on,
So-
Sig. What topic would you? I mean, is there a specific topic? And Sig, are you okay with him going in this topic or no?
Depends on the topic. Let's see. Depends if I'm
Okay,
interested in it.
Agen.
Okay. What if we talk about the Nestorianism, either of patristics, or I can make a metaphysical argument?
Okay. So you want to talk about Nestorianism.
Yeah. Or we can talk about metaphysical topic.
Well, you don't necessarily
Up to you.
have a particular metaphysical scheme you use.
I'm using the one that's a consensus of the fathers.
You're using the one that you believe generates a consensus amongst the fathers. That's different.
Well, you're gonna have to believe in something for it to be your scheme.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that the scheme that you believe in should be properly termed the consensus.
Look, like
of the
now we're gonna
fathers.
now we're gonna debate something else. Like you see, it's just what's gonna happen. I didn't even make an argument yet. We're debating about the debate.
I'm not even debating about the debate. I'm just telling you that you shouldn't use.
So
the
let's.
term consensus.
I mean, Sig, let's pick a topic, man, and I think
Yeah,
let's go
sure,
through
sure,
it.
sure.
If
All
that's
right, okay. So
Okay, how about
let's do the
this? How about
Nestorianism.
this?
Let's do the metaphysics of the Nestorianism.
The metaphysics of the Nestorians. Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Would you agree
Mhm.
that the Tome of Leo is Nestorian?
Well, it depends on how you qualify Nestorianism to be.
What Nestorius taught in his Bazaar and in his letters, that there's one prosopon and then two pneuma, or one parsopa, two pneuma.
Okay, and how do you define chnoma in this instance?
It would be some individual substance.
An individual substance. Okay.
Yeah, so two individual substances and one person.
And this is like the Aristotelian idea of individual substance.
Yes.
Okay, so you're using Aristotelianism, right?
Well, I'm using it insofar as it's censored in the Fathers, not ripped straight from Aristotle.
Okay, so you're going to pick and choose when individual substance means individual substance, given the fathers. Okay.
Well, you can take Cyril's definition, which is an individual thing from which the common is predicated and spoken.
Okay, and you're going to say that Leo uses the same term for individual substance as chloma?
I would say that Leo has in mind two individual things
Uh-huh.
and not two common things in his person.
Sorry, two common things? And by common,
Yeah,
you mean the same
i.e.
thing?
ousia.
Okay, so
Ousia,
we can look at the tome. So where in the tome would you just say is problematic?
everywhere.
Okay.
One specific part, for example,
wait for this.
when he says, "He whom Herod treacherously endeavors to destroy is like ourselves in our earliest stage, but he
What
whom the
translation are
Magi
you
delight
using?
to worship on their knees." This is a translation, I think it's from Grillmeyer.
But he whom the Magi
I can give you the
delight to
Latin.
worship. It's fine, I don't need the Latin.
I can give you the line.
If you want the
But he says, "He whom the Magi delight,"
Mhm.
he says, "He whom Herod treacherously endeavors to destroy is like ourselves in our earliest stage. He whom the Magi, but he whom the Magi delight to worship on their knees is the Lord of all." So he makes a distinction between he and he.
So it says here that the he seems to be the subject that Herod treacherously endeavors to destroy is like ourselves. And the he
Mhm.
whom the Magi delight to worship on their knees is the Lord of all. There doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
any linguistic change of the he in the one stage and the he in the second. In fact, here, I have it on New Advent up here, right? We can do this because we're using the translation that you gave, right? Am I allowed to share my screen, guys? So,
Sure. And I can give you the Latin too. It's
if you
said.
wanna
It
use-
uses the word but.
Yeah, no, said doesn't even matter here, right? But is actually used in
It
the
does.
entire category. No, look, right? There enters these lower parts of the world the Son of God, descending from his heavenly home and yet not quitting his Father's glory, begotten in a new order by a new nativity. Because obviously we affirm two nativities, right? In a new order because being invisible in his own nature, he became visible in ours. and he whom nothing could contain was content to be contained. So every single time the term is using he here, you can actually see that it's referring to this one particular individual that's going to have both of these
But he
things that we're
contrasts
talking
it
about.
here.
Yeah, because he's contrasting the way that we can talk about both. But I don't think it's an issue where you are now going to
Both
talk
what?
about... Pardon?
Both what?
Both ways of speaking about Christ. So here he
Well,
actually
he's
says...
speaking of he and he.
Yeah, no, he's speaking of one he and two things that's going on. So he whom Herod...
No, he's speaking of two he's.
Where does he say two he's? It doesn't say. The word said...
Where can I put the quote?
The word... I have it on screen. I have it highlighted.
Oh, you have it on screen?
Yeah,
Let me see.
the word he or said doesn't even mean anything other than but this happens, but this happens, but this happens. There is no
it doesn't
linguistic
say this happened. He said
No,
quem.
what- okay, sed quem meaning he, but he, right?
Mhm. So
Okay,
literally
well,
Latin
that
is
doesn't-
similis est rudimentes hominum, quem Herodes impi moletur occidere,
Okay.
sed
Okay, I'll
dominus
get-
est omnium, quem magi, and then continues.
Yes, but again, what you're trying to dispute here is the fact that the term said is used, and therefore it means that there's a separation. That doesn't follow. The term said doesn't even have to generate that at all. That's just Latin.
Okay, if I show you an unequivocal place, where he distinguishes the he from he, are you going to concede this?
I'm going to have to. What we're arguing right about now is actually this little word here. That this distinguishes this he from this he.
Yeah, but he.
But the problem is that doesn't generate that, given the fact that he has already been contextualized as he
It does.
whom Herod treacherously endeavors to destroy is like
And then he
ourselves,
says, but he.
But he whom the Magi delight to worship on their knees, which is the same he that Herod treacherously endeavors
No,
to
it's
destroy.
not the same he.
Yes, it is, because the word but
No, it's
does
not.
not introduce that there is a second.
It does.
No, it
Grammatically,
doesn't.
it does.
It grammatically
And
does
I'll show
not.
you more unequivocally.
Okay,
Do you
so
know how to
here- so here-
access
so here's not
Gromeyer's
unequivocal.
Christ and Christian tradition?
Sure, I can access. I'll try and access Grommeyer now, but I want to access the term of Leo in Latin.
Okay. Because I'm going to show you in his other works that he explicitly does it.
Mm-hmm.
Check your DMs because I can't put it in the side chat.
You can put it in.
This is
side-
in
can
Sermon
someone-
54.
Can someone give him perms to put it in side chat, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
That'd be good. Here we go. So you'll find this in Grillmeyer. New Advent hides it. I can give you the original Latin. But it literally says,
Mhm.
God therefore assumed the whole man
Mhm.
and joined himself to him
Mhm.
and him to himself, out of mercy and power, so that each of the two natures inheres in the other and neither changes into the other with the surrender of its properties.
So is this your particular translation of the Latin text?
No.
Okay, this
Right
is
from Grillmeyer.
This is Grillmeyer's, right. God therefore assumed the
Yes.
whole man and joined himself to him and him to himself out of mercy and power, so that each of the two natures inheres in the other and neither changes into the other with the surrender of its properties.
Mhm.
Okay,
So here he
God
makes a
does not-
distinction between he and himself.
Okay, so it says here specifically that he joined man, as in the humanity that he's speaking about. But I don't think that the term himself even needs to be understood as personal as well. The same way that we say man himself likes to watch the world burn, it doesn't mean that we're speaking of a specific person either. So what's
He's
being
making a
contested
distinction
here-
between he and himself.
No, what's being contested here is the definition of himself. That's what's actually being up for dispute.
You want the Latin for it?
As in, look. As in the meaning of himself. Look, you said he and himself, meaning two people or personal identities, right? But the problem is...
Even
is
I can say it's
there's a
two
sense-
substances.
It's not even that he's saying two substances, but rather that there is a separation
Yeah, it
of the
is.
two
He
here.
says it's the two natures.
Sure, but the two natures here aren't being what's in contention for your quotation. You focus on he and himself, but again, he and himself isn't even going to be referring to these two people or persons in that sense. Because I can
It's
say
referring
the
to the
word,
two natures.
because I can say the term himself. Well, no, technically, it's referring to the
Does. He
person
says
that's
it.
inherent. No, it doesn't say that.
Then what?
God, it
Does
says
the person
God.
unite to the
Hold on,
person?
Hold on. It says God. God is the one that's doing the action. Now, God isn't a nature; it's a person here. Therefore, assume the whole man.
So it's an
which is a
individual nature for Leo.
which is a nature. Hold on, and joined himself, meaning the individual nature, to him. And by individual nature, I don't mean individual
It's
substance.
individual
like you
nature,
define it,
yeah.
No. By individual's nature, you don't mean individual substance, which is knoma. I didn't use that. I'm using
It
individual
does.
nature.
It
No.
does. Because Leo says it.
I'm using the term individual nature. You use the term individual
I'll show
substance.
you.
But substance and nature aren't the same thing for you. 1 second.
Give me
You
permission.
saying-
Give me permission to type so I can
Whoa,
prove
whoa,
this.
whoa, Look, I need to continue with this thing here, Reagan, because you're really close. You actually are saying that he joined himself to him. What's being confused here is that the term himself has to, for some reason, refer to a person. But if you don't believe
I
that
didn't
and
say
you're
that.
saying that it's granting a nature, then the term him doesn't
Yeah.
need to refer to a nature either. It can refer to the person the same
It
way they refer.
does.
Okay, so
If it refers to the person, then you would be saying two persons because he's joining himself to
if it refers
him.
to a person, it's no. If himself refers to a nature and him refers to a person, then it's person uniting to a nature. It's not a problem.
Okay, even with that, would you say that there's two he's and those are distinct things?
No, I'm saying that there's two understandings of the word himself that's in that passage. The same way that I
Yeah,
said
but they're
man
distinct here
himself,
because one is
same-
joining to the other.
I'm saying that even the meaning is distinguished. The same way that we say man himself wants to watch the world burn, but I'm not referring to any particular person. You understand that?
Well, man himself indicates one him. Here he's indicating
No,
him
man
joining himself
can
to him.
refer to a generality. It's an actual quote.
I know, but
Sometimes
that's not
man
my point here.
himself wants to watch the world burn. So you
My
need
point
to
here-
demonstrate that himself has to mean a person. That's what you're doing.
I'm
That's what your
saying I'm
intuition
granting that it's an individual nature.
Okay, but you're not granting that the term him is person. So one of the hymns is person, the other of the hymns in
Okay.
its reference is nature. So he joins
So you have two
himself-
distinct hymns.
No, you have two distinct understandings of him. Yes. However,
Okay,
in
and
this
the hymn
passage
is
alone-
distinct. One is person, one is nature.
Okay, so the term that Leo is using. So if we wanted to let's say swap the terms, he joined the nature to his person. Is there an issue there?
Okay. Are you saying that's what he's saying? Would you agree with that? That's what he's saying.
I'm saying, is there an issue there?
Well, there's always an issue with Leo, but I want to know what you affirm for him. Are you saying that he's saying that you're not?
I've just said.
Well, there is an issue, yes.
Okay, so what's the issue with saying that the person united to a nature?
But once you say that both of them are he's, it's an issue.
No, I'm saying if what's being meant is that a person unites to a nature, what's the issue?
It's still wrong because you can't call a nature a he.
Wait, what linguistic feature prevents you from calling a nature a he? We say that man is of common nature.
I'm
We say
talking
that
in the
he
Christological
fell.
context.
But again, there is nothing in the Christological context that generates that you cannot
There
use certain
is.
words
If
for
I
certain
show you?
phrases. Okay,
I'll show you.
All
I'll
right.
give you an anathema on it, actually.
okay. So
It's from
an
the 12 anathemas, where it says
Okay.
you can't call the human nature a he.
Okay. I know where
You
you're
want me to
going.
get
But I know where you're going. By the way, I know where you're going. By the way,
Good.
which anathema are you using?
Let me show you.
Which anathema?
get it for you right now.
I have all 12 up. Which anathema are you using?
I know. Let me get you the number.
Which anathema are you using?
Right here. It's going to be anathema 7 from the 12 anathemas.
I knew it.
You get it from I'm from
Mhm.
P.E. Pusey's translation, 7th anathema.
You're using.
If I
Reverend
can type in the
Pusey.
chat.
I don't need you to use Pusey. I just have this link up here actually. Now here.
Okay.
It
Even
says,
I can't see your screen, but I'm going to trust you're going to read it
Yeah.
faithfully.
If anyone shall say that Christ Jesus as man is only energized by the word of God, and that the glory of the only begotten is attributed to him as something not properly his, let him be anathema. So where does it say if you refer to the nature in the prefix of a he, you're anathema? It doesn't say that.
Let me show you Pusey's translation, if you let me type.
But now you're relying on Pusey's translation rather than.
If I get the Greek and it actually says that, would you concede?
If you say the Greek term says, if you say that the human nature is he, let him be anathema, then yes, I would concede. But it would again
Oh my.
demonstrate.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Let me type in chat, schoolboy. Let me type in chat. First, I'll get you Pusey's translation, then I'll get it from the Greek.
I don't need Reverend Pusey because we don't take him as an authority, do you? Actually, no.
But just so you know, it's not my translation.
Agen, I'd love to give you perms to be able to type in chat, but if I unlock it for everybody, it's
Make
just
a
going to
channel.
be another
Just make a channel that only me and Agen can talk in.
How sweaty of a mod do you think I am?
That's okay. Okay. Agen, just send it to me in DMs. I'm streaming, guys. If you want to see what
Okay.
Agen posts, just come to my stream. Is that okay if I take your viewers, guys?
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine, but we already got the viewers in the.
This is from P.A. Pusey. It says, if any says
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus has been enwroughten as man by God the Word,
Mm-hmm.
and that the good glory of the only begotten has been put around him,
Mm-hmm.
as though he were other than he, be he anathema.
Okay.
This is from Pusey's translation.
So Pusey's
You want me to get the Greek?
Pusey's translation is actually really fine. It says, if any says that Jesus has been inwrought in as man by God the Word, and that the good glory of the unbegotten has been put around him, and this is really important, it's been put around him as though he were other than he. It does not say if you refer to the human nature as he, you're anathema. That's intuition pumping.
To say as though he were other than he means that this is the height of blasphemy, which necessitates and is followed by saying he's raw and in the good glory is given around him. So he's saying the final heresy you can have is to say that he is other than he, and it's necessitated by what's said prior. So this makes my point stronger.
No, it doesn't. Because you are trying to assume that simply by referring to the human nature as he, that you fall under the condemnation of the anathema. But the anathema does not speak on whether or not you can refer to it as a he, but only on whether or not you attribute the relation to the nature as only one of glory and grace given, as though he were other than he. But that is
But
not
what does the as though there?
Yeah.
What does the as though there mean?
Because other means that
If
there is
you-
a separate person being invoked. But the problem is that's
No, but
not
the
what's
as
being
though
invoked.
specifically grammatically when he says as though, what does it mean when I say as though? It's like, for example, if I say,
Like,
dude,
it means like.
if you walk to the store, yeah, exactly. If you walk to the store as though you're a homeless person, I'm not going to be friends with you.
Yes.
It means that the highest thing that you don't want your friend to do is to be in any similitude like walking like a homeless person. And
No, but the
Cyril here
problem
is saying,
but the problem is look, I can summarize this right. Cyril is saying that he's saying that if you do this thing like this, then that's a problem. The problem is with what you're saying, like is the phrase "he were other than he," right?
which is what Leo has.
But that is what you're contesting. The other than he is what's.
That's what he says. You agree with it.
Could you? Okay.
You said one is the person, the other is the nature.
Pull up the Greek texts again, but that's not a he. The term he is a personal term in the anathema, not in Leo. I'm contesting that for Leo. I argue that the term he, like I've shown you poetically, can be used in this equivocal or dual way. In the anathema,
how do you know it's being used as a person?
That's fine. That's fine. I'm able to generate that reading. All I need is to be able to generate the reading.
How do you know?
Okay, so you're asking how I know because of the next text that is in Leo. So when Leo says, "But he whom the Magi delight to worship on their
I'm
knees,"
talking about your reading of the
fine.
anathema. You said the reading of the anathema is that it's condemning two persons.
The reading of the anathema is the term person because he being other than he is in reference to individuals.
How do you know that?
Right.
How do you know that?
Okay, how do I know that? Because I think the rest of the 12 anathemas is making that particular claim as well. For example,
give me an example.
For example, Canon 6, where it says, or Canon 9, right? If any man shall say that the one Lord Jesus Christ was glorified by the Holy Ghost, so that he used through him a power that is not from him, and received power against unclean spirits, and power to work miracles before men, and shall not confess that it was his own spirit through which he worked through these divine signs, that it be anathema. It is giving someone the power to do miracles rather than it is Christ as a man just doing the miracles. So we already have pretext for being able to.
So that's how you know. That's how you know something's Nestorian.
That's how I know for Cyril specifically that he's using the text he referring to a person rather than a nature. Not how I know what Nestorianism is. You are conflating the two again. What we are trying to establish
how do you know
right
again?
now, 1 second. What we are trying to establish right now. Can you stop streaming here and restart? Hold on. Can I come back and restart? All right, I'm back. All right.
Dude got summoned to the Shadow Realm.
I'm back. Sorry, Respectable had problems watching me stream. So, like I said before, when it comes to what you asked of me is, can you show me how he from he in the Cyrilline text, means person from person, and how in the Leo text it means person from nature? How do you know in Cyril it's person from person? So that's the question. The question is not, and I want to be very clear, the question is not, how does SIIIG calculate Nestorianism? That's a different thing. Now, the answer to that question was appealing to a different canon. This gives me the interpretive feature that I need, and I demonstrated that I believe the the best succinct way I can. The second thing now is a different point of conversation, which is how does one generate Nestorianism? Which, like you said, Nestorianism...
Let me address the beginning part.
Okay, so we won't go into the other part, but this beginning part is... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. If the way you measure what the 12 anathemas are trying to anathematize by appealing to the other anathemas, if I show you the 12 anathemas condemning two natures, would you then
That's
agree
not-
that Leo is an historian?
That's not what's being talked about. Again, that's not even responding to the other point. That's actually setting up another conversation. Again,
No, because
remember,
you appeal to
Agen,
Anathema
hey,
6,
Agen.
where there's a miracle being done through another. But I can also show that in Leo.
No, that's again a different point of argument. The argument, Agen, as we know, is talking about whether or not when Cyril says the phrase he from he, that he in Cyril is in reference to person from person. And in
it's
Leo,
in reference to two individual
from
substances.
Himself, he in himself is referring to person in nature. So this is something that needs to actually be done, okay? That needs to actually be done in order to generate what's going on. So I think I've actually exhausted that particular topic. You've tried 2 times now to move to a different line of questioning that is related but not
It's the
identical.
same line of questioning.
It is not the same line of questioning. The same line of questioning would be, if I showed you where Cyril says he from he means person from person, would you concede? But you didn't show that. You showed where
No,
he
no,
from he
that's
does
not my
mean
argument.
That is the argument that you
my
said.
argument is that
Remember,
my argument is that whatever you pull from the 12 anathemas to try and show that Leah wouldn't believe, the only things that are ever said in the 12 anathemas are things that could be posited by Leo in his own works.
I have it on
It's letters
stream.
and sermons.
I have it on stream. That, again, that is more of a crux argument, right? That's a crux argument. But this particular argument that you're making before we move to something else was that Leo commits
It's the
heresy.
same thing.
No, Leo
He
commits
does.
heresy. Hold on. You said Leo commits heresy when he uses the term, under Reverend Pusey's translation, by the way, he from himself. That was what you particularly contested. I said, well, himself is referring to a nature, but he in that particular work was referring to person. So it's a person.
How do you know that's what Leo's
nature.
saying?
Exactly. And I said the context for that was the previous sentences in the chapter that make that known. Then you said,
where does Sermon 54 says that?
We're going to sermon. We're looking at letter 28 in the tome.
Well, letter 28, I'm exegeting via the Sermon 54.
The tome
because you
is
first
what
contested.
We have the problem is. We're not talking about whether or not Leo is an historian. We're talking about whether the tome is an historian.
Well, listen.
So which one are we doing? Are we
first
doing
you
the entire
contested.
corpus of
First
Leo, or
you
are we doing the
contested.
tome? We
Let
need
me
to choose
explain.
one now.
Let me explain.
Was it jumping
Let me
from
explain. Because
argument to argument?
at first, you said that there are not 2 distinguished he's. That's why I showed you that for Leo, he actually does have 2 distinguished he's. Then you rightfully retracted and said, "Well, yes." Wait, come on, dude. I let you speak for a bit.
That's what I
I'll let
said.
you speak for a bit.
No, you've been.
I'll let you speak for a bit, dude. I'll let you speak for way too long of a time.
Let's just let him respond.
That's fine.
Okay. First, you tried to say it's not teaching 2 he's. The said here is not contrasting 2 he's. So I had to show you via exegeting Leo in his other text, which is completely valid to do. He actually does distinguish he from he. And then you retracted, rightfully so. Well, actually, there are 2 he's in the tome, but one is referring to person, one is referring to nature. Now you're trying to go back to the tome to show how this is the case. That one of the he's is person, the other. It is what you said, but go ahead. You can explain yourself.
That's not my argument. When I said he from himself, that was the Reverend Pusey quote. But he from no.
For Cyril,
okay.
Yeah, but for Leo, no.
You can actually. We have the Reverend Pusey quote right here, and you can read the exact
for Cyril
line that you said. No. Again, not for Cyril. The Pusey quote that the Grillmeyer quote that you used was from Leo. Okay, and that was in the tome.
Yes.
That was where you generated the phrase he
Sermon
from
54.
Himself. Good. Sermon 54.
To exegete the tome.
And then I showed how in Sermon 54, himself is in reference to the nature. But that was for Sermon 54, not the tome.
So you read the 2 he's differently in the tome?
1 second. Because the context of the letter and even the phrasing can generate that particular interp. When it comes to the tome, before you interrupt, the tome does not do it in the section that you are talking about. He whom Herod treacherously endeavors to destroy is like ourselves in our earlier stage, but he whom the Magi delight to worship on their knees is Lord of all. What you try to contest is the word said, which means but in Latin, but you weren't able to demonstrate why that refers to 2 persons, other than the fact that it says but he. There was no semantic argument that
is
was
he referring to
generated.
Person in nature in letter 28?
In letter 28, he's referring to person, but he doesn't generate another person. It doesn't.
But does it generate another nature?
What?
Is the two he's in the letter? Is it talking about
Again,
one of the he's being a person and the other he being a nature?
That is that's in linguist. Sorry, that's an interpretive assumption.
Oh,
There's
but
no
you said
two he's
earlier
here.
about the tome that one
No,
was
I
for
didn't
person
say
and one
earlier
was for
about the
nature.
tome. No, I was talking
Yes,
about.
you did.
No,
If I show you, if I show you saying that, will you concede?
Agen, I'm gonna show you how you're gonna strawman me here. Agen, when I said he,
You said it.
Hold on, Agen. When I said he and himself, is the phrase he and himself in the section of the term that we're discussing?
No, you were talking about the tome specifically. You said you said in the tome.
Hold on. Is he?
You said
and
in the
himself,
tome.
1 second.
SIIG, I'm not gonna let you be. I'm not gonna let you be dishonest. I'm gonna tell you what you said.
I'm gonna continue.
You said in the tome. You said in the tome one was for person.
Is he?
You said in the tome
himself.
SIIG,
a term that was used in.
Let me get this out.
Grillmeyer quote, Agen. Yes
Let
or no?
me get this out, SIIG.
Was it used in the Grillmeyer quote, Agen?
Let me get this out. Let me get this out.
Quote, Agen. Was it used in the Grillmeyer quote?
SIIG.
Yes,
let me
it was.
get this out.
So since it was used
if I'm about to strawman you, you have nothing to be afraid of. You can just correct me.
To be afraid of,
but you specifically said about letter.
Quote, you then
guys, SIIG, guys, let SIIG let him strawman you if he's going to, just please.
Yes, if I'm really about to strawman you, because I know exactly what I'm gonna say. You said it on recording in your own stream. You said it. You said one was referring to person. One was referring to nature. Then you said you can figure this out in the context of the tome. So you were talking about the tome when you said that there were two he's, one was person, one was nature. Now you're trying to retract that.
Okay, so I want to be very clear because as you can see, there are times in which I may be missaying certain things. However, in this particular case, and look at you interrupt again because you wanted to claim something.
Agen, let him respond, please.
So I'm going to actually continue it, right? So in the context of the text that we are talking about three texts right now. One is a translation from Reverend Pusey. The other one is a letter from Grillmeyer, a translation from Grillmeyer. And the other one is actually in the term of Leo. Now, I am referring to he from himself, which clearly everyone here knows that he from himself is in direct and explicit reference to the new quotation that you tried to cite, which is letter 54. If I said tome once, I want to be clear, I exactly, explicitly, extrinsically meant letter 54. Because the phrase he and himself makes that abundantly clear. Because the term he and but he is not in letter 54, but is actually in the term that we're discussing. As a matter of fact, I would like individuals that are either for me or against me to correctly make sure that the citations for what I'm saying line up and back up exactly what I'm saying. When it comes to what I'm talking about with the tome, we were talking about said, right? He, but he. That is the tome quote. He and himself, if you scroll up again, is the Grillmeyer quote. We all know that. I was saying in the Grillmeyer quote, himself is nature, him is person. But in the tome, he but he does not generate two he's or two persons, but one person that is being referred to in two different occasions. One where Herod is.
If I show you the contrary from your own mouth,
I'm not going to allow you to interrupt me here. Thank you. And the other time is when the my guy is doing these things. Now, I want you to demonstrate exactly why, using the Cyrilline citation that you gave, that it has to be only interpreted in the way that you are trying to aforemention. Go ahead.
Okay. Before any of that, if I show you specifically from your own mouth that you claim there was a he referring to person and a he referring to nature in the tome, will you concede that the tome is Nestorian?
Hold on. I won't have to concede the term is historian. All I would have to concede was that I was speaking too fast. That's all. I don't have to concede the term is historian.
So you would retract. If you did say that, you would retract it now.
Like I said, I would say, just refer to what I just said before. That's all I would have to do. And plus, I'm streaming live now, so people could just go back to my stream.
But I know. You know how I know? You know how I know you didn't misspeak? Because you said if you look at the prior sentences, but you never opened up Sermon 54's prior sentences. You only looked at the tome's prior sentences.
The tome's prior sentences was he, but not
so you didn't misspeak.
No.
So you didn't misspeak.
No, 1 second. I misspoke. If I misspoke, by the way, big caveat. I'm talking about when you asked me, how do you know he and but he does not generate two persons? That when the term he is used in the sentence, that it's only in reference to one person. I'm not changing the subject. I'm actually clarifying exactly what was going on. Yes, you are. So when he and but he was actually being used, we know that he and but he was in reference to person all the time, given the fact that
You said it was the
in the
person and
context
nature.
of the tome, that's what's going on. What in letter 54?
You said it was person and
it
nature.
is person and yeah, in letter 54, not in the tome.
No,
Two
you
things.
said in the tome because you
brought
appealed
up
to the
three
prior
quotes.
sentences
You
in the
brought up
tome.
three quotes. You brought up three quotes. You are confusing my argument.
You appealed. You were talking about the tome, and you know how I know you didn't misspeak?
I was talking
Because you
about
said
the
you would go
tome
to the
for
prior
he and
sentences
but
in the
he.
tome.
Yeah, for he and but he. For he and but
No,
he.
for person and nature.
No, for he and but he.
Yes. If I show you, will
Okay,
you
so
retract?
if it's he and but he, I'm referring to the tome. But if it's he and himself, I'm being very clear right now.
No.
If it's
No,
he and
when you
himself,
said
you're
person,
saying, no, I'm the
when you
person
said
that
one
was
of the
saying
he's,
the words, and I'm telling you what I
when
mean
you
by what I
said
say.
one
I'm
of the
trying to be clear
he's,
with you.
when you said one of the he's was a
I'm
person and
saying
one of the
that
he's was a nature,
Yes, for
you said
letter
it.
54.
You said it was the
For
tome.
letter 54.
No, you said it was the tome.
Yes, for letter 54. And if I said the tome,
No,
then I'm
what do you mean
clearly
yes?
trying to say letter 54. Yes, for letter 54.
No,
yes.
because you appealed to the prior sentences, but you don't
and
have sermon 54 over you.
I appealed to the prior sentences for what? For the tome, for
what?
he but he.
Exactly. So
For
you were
he
talking
but
about the
he.
tome.
For he but he. When I was
No,
talking about he
you
but
talked
he,
about the person
not
and the
he
nature.
himself. You are
I'm
misunderstanding
not gonna
my
let
argument
you.
again.
I'm not gonna
That's
let
what's
you lie.
going on,
I'm
man.
not gonna let you lie.
No one's
You
lying
were
here.
talking
I'm being
about the
completely
person.
honest.
You were talking about the person
By
and
the way,
nature,
your entire argument
and then you said
rests on me like misspeaking or something.
no. It rests on you being
It
a liar.
does.
That's what it
doesn't
rests
rest on me
on.
being a liar. It actually rests on me
It
being able to
does.
clarify the things that I'm saying. That's all.
No, because you didn't clarify. You said I might have
fine with this. I
misspoke,
think I'm satisfied
but then
with the particular
you
apologetic
proved
here.
by your own words. You proved by your
No,
own
I
words you had the
didn't.
tome in thought when you said the tome.
No, I don't prove by my words that I have the tome
Yes.
at all.
I promise you, I'm gonna send you the clip after this. I'm gonna
And
send
then I
it
can just clarify
directly
the
to
clip
you.
that I have. You can send me the clip
You're
now if
gonna
you want.
clarify. You're gonna clarify that you misspoke, even though you had the tome in your head.
No, I did not have the tome in my head.
Yes.
He, but he
Then why did you
is
appeal to the
referring
prior
tome
sentences?
Because I was talking about he, but he. He, but he is in reference
Exactly.
to the tome. Okay, well that's in reference
No,
to the
you
tome.
said it was a person
but
in nature.
He and himself is in reference to letter 54. So I
But you
used two
said
different
person in
arguments for
nature
that.
and then appeal to the tome.
I did not appeal to the tome there, no.
Yes, you did.
And if if you understood that I was appealing to the tome, I'm telling you now, so that you understand how clear the conversation is going, that when I say he and himself, I'm using your translation of letter 54. But when I say he, but he,
because you said
that's
you
got-
have to look at the
ha-ha,
prior
that's got
sentences.
he and the tome.
Guys. Can we
Right.
please try to move this forward path? Just
I
in a
genuinely,
purely semantic-
if he
I
doesn't
wanna be-
concede
Hold on,
this, I genuinely.
Agen, how
Go
are you
ahead.
going to have a debate if you can't even refrain from interrupting a moderator in a debate?
Go ahead, school. I thought you were
Come on,
just
dude.
telling us to stop. Go ahead.
No, like I'm just asking, can we move this to something actually substantive? Because this has been a
Yeah.
90% semantic conversation for 3 hours.
Mhm. I'd like to do
It's
this,
always-
right? I want to do this. So there is something that I want to talk about because now you've been talking for almost an hour.
Hold on.
So you've been
SIIG.
talking to much more time
SIIG.
than myself.
SIIG.
Since
You
Bryce,
went-
since
you
Schoolboy
went
has said that
SIIG.
he wants to move on, I'll respect the moderator's decision to do so. If you
SIIG.
want to pull up something
SIIG.
after this, that's fine.
Before
We can keep
anything.
going. So
Before anything.
no, because you're gonna
I'm
try
not
and
gonna-
resurrect it again. You're gonna try and resurrect it again.
I'm
I
not
won't
gonna.
answer anything.
No, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say, unless you can concede that you actually made a mistake, because I have the clip. I'm not gonna continue with you because you're a liar. You're not
There
continuing
you
in good
go.
faith.
Okay, I am continuing in good faith, and in fact, I'm listening to the moderator. If you want to run away from the
Because I'm gonna show you the clip.
If you want to run away from the moderator out of this particular excuse,
I've spoken to you for 3 hours. I've spoken to you for
that's
3
fine.
hours.
And I haven't
all of my
detracted
logical-
from anything. I haven't detracted from anything.
You did.
No, I did not.
You
Now,
did.
since you
If-
want to continue that,
if you
I
don't
do want to
concede,
have
we're
a
not gonna
conversation on
continue.
soteriology here. So, to talk about consubstantiality in the context of soteriology, we need to establish
this is
whether or
entirely
not
fruitless,
Christ
dude.
was able to assume the nature that we have in order to be able to save it.
You already tried going this line of argumentation. It was
No,
fruitless.
I did
I
not
don't think
go
this
down
is.
this
I don't think this is
particular
smart.
argumentation. We went down the idea of consubstantiality specifically, but we are talking about exactly the assumption for salvation. I did not talk about soteriology with you. Now, we know that what is not assumed is not saved, okay? Now, what I would like to argue and ask you is, what guarantees the fact that the human property of Christ's mind is the same kind of mind that is consubstantial with my mind to save it? What guarantees
Okay.
that they are the same?
Before I answer that, Schoolboy, can you make it like 15 minutes and then we just end it there? Put 15 minutes on the clock or something.
I want to keep
I'll
going.
put the
Because this
I'll
was
put
going
the-
for way too long, and I
all right.
genuinely, and I mean this genuinely. I don't think you're an honest person.
You can say
All
whatever
right,
you
guys,
Let's do it for
if
15
you-
minutes.
That's fine.
okay.
I don't think
So
you're
what
honest
we'll do.
either.
Okay, well, what we're gonna do is, all right, we'll do 20 minutes. All right, you guys continue this, and then we'll end it there. Is that okay? Both of you guys agree with this or no? And then if you guys want to
No.
have a debate later on,
Can we actually, just for ease of conversation, can we actually just do it like formal, like timed rounds? Because I'm sick of this interrupting.
Yeah.
I'm sick of.
Completely
I'm
and
sick
we
of
could do it that
semantic
way too.
disputes. If there's anything that you guys actually like need to hash out,
This is something really bad for him.
definitions.
Okay.
I mean,
he's gonna
you
keep
can do them
doing
during
this.
cross examination, but can we do like 5 minutes each and then a 10-minute
This is something actually very, very shameful
10-minute
for him
open
to do.
discussion?
Please, man. We'll do it that way, and we can end this, man.
We'll try our
Can
best
end
to,
like
yeah.
that.
Let's go.
Okay. All right.
All right, let me get a timer.
You gonna do a timer? All right.
Now, what topic you want to do, SIIIG? Because soteriology is pretty boring. But if you want to do it,
Soteriology-
I mean,
soteriology-
I understand why he's going this route, because I think that there needs to be a reflexivity between all systems, triadology, Christology, soteriology,
so this is the thing.
anthropology.
fair enough.
Yeah. So the language scheme that we use needs to be uniform across the various aspects of theology that we are concerned with. Apart from confessional appeals to wanting to preserve a particular form of language, we need to make sure that we have good grounds to use certain language conventions like we do. So the first thing that I would like to actually ask you, and not even just ask you, but I'm going to establish this, is by looking at the idea of Christ's nature in the context of triadology and then in the context of Christology. Is the language that we use in the context of triadology...
Are you timing this, schoolboy?
Yeah, he's got 4 minutes and 21 seconds.
Right. So
go ahead,
is the context... Actually, no. You know what? I won't go first. Agen can go first, and then I can go. Is that okay?
But you're the one. I don't know what we're talking about. So you go first.
If you want to make the argument,
yeah.
finish
Agen,
the
you can make any argument you want, and then I'll do the 5 minutes after you. I don't mind.
Just any random argument, and then you're going to make another one, or is it going to be the same topic?
Same topic.
Same topic.
We're gonna do.
Well,
same
it's his topic. It's his topic. It's only fair he goes first.
You want him to go first?
I think that's actually fair.
Okay.
Say, because you're arguing against. He's got the positive claim, so.
So he would have to argue first, no?
But I don't know. Like what you're trying to argue about. You just said soteriology.
You can choose any topic you want.
No,
I'm going
true.
to talk about soteriology, but you can talk about anything you want.
Just let SIIIG talk. So it's the same discussion. Let SIIIG talk first. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
that's fine.
just finish up, Sig. You've got 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
Okay, cool. So does the language that we use in triadology map onto Christology?
Well, go 5 minutes uninterrupted, and then we have 10 minutes.
5 minutes.
If he wants to ask questions,
I'd rather
during
I'd rather
I'm not
just do
being
this.
super formal here.
Yeah. So
And then
Okay.
by the way, only questions you can. I mean, just for the sake of it, like so we don't waste each other's time. Let's just do clarifiers if needed. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I did just pause, so I'm going to restart the clock.
Thank you, schoolboy. God bless you. All right.
Go ahead.
So, again, my first question is going to be: does the language that we use concerning triadology map onto the language that we use Christologically speaking?
The language can be the same, but the things being picked out will never be the same, because one is the divine essence. It's completely incomprehensible. The union is in some sense comprehensible. So the terms can be the same, but the things being picked out will never be the same.
Okay. So when people are able to look at the context of salvation, we know that what is not assumed is not saved. Is a nature assumed by Christ or simply human properties?
Nature is assumed.
Okay.
With will in mind.
Mhm.
Keep on.
That's fine. With that being said, is there ever a sense in which Christ's nature that is human no longer exists?
It always exists.
Okay. So the nature itself that is human always exists. Is that different in the way that we are considering than the divine nature that also exists?
When we duly enumerate them in the mind, yes.
Okay, so we can say, and again, this is after the union. This is not talking about before the particular conception of the union. This is afterwards.
So as epistemologically, like the product of the union, sorry, to clarify, are you talking about the product of the union or the temporal instance of the one Christ?
Because the product of the union is a union because its temporal, because its parts still exist. Like when, say for example, you have a human being, right? You have a human being and then its particular property of like prescience, right? Like it always has this property of prescience, it never loses it. Those are two different planes of existence, right? Being a human and being prescient aren't on the same plane of existence. But now a human being has the ability to just to be prescient all the time. Now, here's the issue that I have, okay? Does because of this union now between humanity and prescience, does the distinction between humanity and prescience go away?
And define prescience.
Prescience is
Can
the
you give a
ability
definition?
to know and see all things at any given time whatsoever.
Uh,
Mhm.
okay. And are you applying that to the flesh of Christ?
I'm applying this to any human being. So let's say a human being on this plane of existence, which is the physical plane of existence as well as spiritual plane, for some reason has this particular divine quality of prescience, right? God could do that if he wanted to. If this
Minute
human
30.
Thank you. Yeah, if this human being has that, does the ability of prescience go away simply because those two things are combined?
Can I clarify? Are you just referring to always having some type of conception of something?
Not just having the conception of something, but that the property actually exists.
Well, I mean, it exists imminently, and it will always have it.
Right. So this idea, this ability of prescience also exists even after it's combined with the human being that we're talking about.
I mean, I would say the bounds and potencies belong to the human. It's not just given by acquisition temporally. Man was created with that.
But prescience itself, in this particular analogy, will always have it now. Like once it gains this
Well,
particular
yes.
property, right, and it all exists after it's being combined with this humanity that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So-
I don't see it as a combination, by the way.
but
I see it
issue
as
but the issue
something
is-
that's
That's fine. But the problem is,
Go ahead.
you don't see the union of Christ as a combination either. You believe that there's a product that's made out of two.
I do.
Some
I see it as a combination.
Okay, so does so if the combination is of these two things, the thing that grounds the combination are the two natures, correct?
Hmm.
Okay, does the thing that ground the combination of Christ's union exist after the union?
The thing that grounds. Well, when we say the thing that grounds, let me just answer this and then give SIIG another question.
He's
So the
close,
thing
he's
that
so close.
grounds,
We got him.
that was a very vague question. I would say you need a multiplicity of things for there to be united. After the union, you don't have those constituents anymore enumerated, but they still exist in natural quality.
But the problem is with natural quality, you know that what makes the two things united are the two things that are the parts for the composition of that union. If those two things don't exist, then the thing that made the union be united in the first place wouldn't exist either.
It exists qualitatively after the union, not quantitatively.
Exist for the union to take place and be established.
They exist.
Now,
They exist for the union to take place. They remain even after in natural quality.
But the problem is the natural quality is not what made the union the union. Their nature, which are the principles of the natural qualities, actually made the union. So in order to conceive that, you would only have one nature, and this is a problem, without actually its principle for its union. Because the natural qualities weren't the principle for the union, the natures were.
The natural quality would be the principle for the union,
But
because the natural quality is the summation of all the predicates of the nature.
Then you're a nominalist about natures then, after the union.
No.
Yes, because
No.
the natures themselves don't exist. They're not universal.
They do, just not enumerated.
Okay, so they actually exist. So there's two natures after the union. You just don't count two natures after the union.
Well, there's not two natures because you just counted it itself.
No. You say that there are, you just don't count. The same way that I can say that there are
Qualitatively.
three things that we can call God. Yeah, so there are qualitatively two natures after the union. Can we agree with that?
Well, you just said qualitatively and then employed quantitatively.
Okay, so again, qualitatively, right? Qualitatively leads to do with the kind. But if Christ is not the same kind of human nature as humans, given the fact that he doesn't actually have a nature that human beings have, he just has the natural properties they have, then he wouldn't be consubstantial with them.
He would be, because the natural qualities are the foundation within the one substrate that possesses them.
But what makes
So the
someone
one substrate is a
consubstantial with
God-man substrate.
But what makes someone consubstantial with someone else is not whether or not they have the set of properties, but whether they have the nature, which is the principle for that set of properties. If they lose the
Well, that
principle,
nature-
then they lose the set.
That nature is retained within that set of natural qualities. So I can give an example.
So the nature is retained. The nature still exists.
It exists in the set of natural characteristics.
Right, so then-
and I can
but
explain
then
this if you
you're
let me
just-
give an example.
But just one second, because it's still my time. So then the nature, you're just reducing it to the set of natural qualities. That's what you're doing.
It's not a reduction, but basically
You are,
the
because there's no
misunderstanding
difference
here.
between the properties of the natural qualities and then the natural qualities themselves. There's no difference.
The misunderstanding here is that you don't understand the relation between accidents and substance. So the substance possesses the accidents, but the accidents are never reducible to that substance.
Okay.
When we say that the two natures unite, that's the foundation for the union.
All right, here's the
But
final
after the
question I
union-
have, right? Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you affirm two nativities, correct?
That he's born of God and born of man.
Yeah, are there two nativities?
The one substance has those two relations. If you take nativity as a relation, the one substance has
I take
it.
nativity as the action of proceeding from someone. The same way that Christ proceeded from the mother of God is the same way that he proceeded from the Father.
If you just take like the proceeding as a relation, like there's the procedure and the preceded.
Nativities?
If you take it as a relation,
I think the term
one
relation
nature
is vague,
has
which
those
is
two
why I'm not
relations.
using it.
Well, I can explain how I'm using it.
That's fine. I don't want
See
to
if
use
it
it. I don't
aligns
need
with
to
yours.
use the term. I'm
Okay.
asking you whether or not
I
there are
need to
two
use the
nativities.
term so you understand.
I don't think you do. I don't think the language of relation needs to be employed, given the fact that that seems to be a scholastic input, and we're not scholastic.
Well, it's not even scholastic. Relations have existed prior to scholasticism. But anyways,
Yes, and it's
the
existed
reason
in the
I
Western
say that
tradition, but the problem
the
that I
reason
have
the reason I
is-
say that the reason I say that is because nativity will refer to coming forth from something, like you said. It requires another. It's actually foundational within that other. So because of that, it needs two things that are formally constituted. It would be a relation.
Okay, so again, that thing that's formally if that's what you mean by relation, you're saying that this thing comes from this thing, but you're trying to reduce it to a particular principle. But I'm not reducing it to a principle. I'm actually reducing it to a particular action that's instantiated. So again,
Well, that
Mary-
action is related between
so
two.
again, are there two births that go on with the person of Christ? So he's born from the Father and he's born from the Mother of God. as
You
we
can
know.
say he's born from the father and born from the mother.
Okay, is the thing that grounds the thing that was born, right? The thing that grounds the birth of the mother, is that the same thing as the thing that grounds the birth of from the father?
If you view one thing and another thing, then you're doing it en theoria and they're not the same.
But again, outside of the mind, there was a birth of the mother, different from the birth of the father.
Well, the birth of the mother was instantaneous with the becoming of one with the word.
That's true, but the birth of the father is not the same as the birth from the mother. Even
But temporally,
outside of the
then it would have just
consideration
been
of
the
mind.
word.
Okay, so again, temporally, we are talking about the birth from the mother. The thing that was the birth from the mother, the action of birth from the mother itself is not the same as the action of birth from the father. We know that.
It's not the same, but the
Okay,
one
so then
subject
there's
possesses
different-
both
so that-
relations.
That's fine, but then there's different births going on outside of the mind.
Well, even if you say it's outside of the mind, if you wanted to pinpoint a temporal
There you go,
moment,
it's outside of the
as
mind.
soon as the flesh was concretized, it was made numerically one. So there was never a res which maintained that relata outside of union with the word.
Again, this is a scholastic import. You don't need to use that. And I haven't.
Okay, I'll say it in English.
Mhm.
There was never a thing that has that relation that was not the word temporally.
Okay, that's true. But the problem that you have with there not being a thing that had that particular relation that isn't the word is the fact that there are still two things that we can actually count there. And I'm not using theoria.
I
for that.
disagree.
Okay, but you're not contemplating that because theoria is the usage of the nous.
You
the
are.
eye of the soul. No. The eye of the soul, correct?
You are.
Okay.
I can explain.
No. Am I using the
Because-
eye of the soul to see? Okay, for example, let's say not even Nicodemus. Let's say the Pharisees. The Pharisees acknowledged that Jesus Christ was the son of a carpenter and that you could see his mother and his brothers, right? So that means that they acknowledged the fact that he was born from a human being. That he was born from another human being, correct? Did the
Repeat that
Phar-
again?
That means that they acknowledged that Christ was born from a human being.
Yeah, they acknowledge that.
Okay. Are they acknowledging that he was born from God?
They're acknowledging he's born from God in one sense, born from the Virgin in another.
In what way?
But that
can you
one was born
acknowledge-
from both.
In what way can a noose darkened person acknowledge that Christ is born from God in a sense?
Well, that would just go into whether or not the Trinity can be known by natural reason. I can actually give you an argument for knowing begetting by natural reason, if you want me to, but that's completely
Knowing
unrelated.
specifically that the Son is begotten from the Father. That in some sense they
Well, yeah, you
knew
can know that.
because the Son was born from Mary, he was born from God.
Well, because he's born
Well-
from Mary is one relation, being born from God is another relation.
How do they know the other relation?
Either because of the scriptures or because what happened with Peter was flesh and blood didn't reveal it, but the Father did.
I didn't talk about Peter. I talked about the Pharisees. How
Well,
do the
I did.
Pharisees?
I did.
I know you did, and I'm granting that Peter knew both nativities. But how do the Pharisees know both nativities?
Do the Pharisees ever exhibit that they know the Son is begotten? Let's say Nicodemus. When Nicodemus talks
I
with
didn't
Christ,
refer to Nicodemus. I only refer to the Pharisees that said that Jesus
Just
Christ
Pharisees
was born
in
from
general?
the carpenter's son. No, specifically the Pharisees in the citation that I cited in Scripture.
okay, so when they know that he's the carpenter's son, how did they know that?
Because they knew that he was the son of his mother.
Yes.
Okay, so did they know that he was born from God? The same person that was born from the mother was born from God. Did they know that?
They didn't know that.
They did not know that. So since they did not know that, there is one nativity without theoria that is being known, and another nativity that isn't being known.
But they still are viewing the one incarnate nature of the Word. They're just ignorant about another relation he has.
Is that true?
Well, they're aware of one nativity or one relation.
Good,
I'm even granting that.
Well, that means that means that you are able to distinguish one from another, meaning you can distinguish one even from non-existence, because they don't even think that it exists, without using theoria. You can distinguish a birth from Christ that in no way is the birth of God the Word from the Father.
I didn't tell you
without theoria.
I didn't tell you the two relations need theoria. I'm telling you two things that have those relations need theoria.
You said knowing those two things requires theoria, but I've just shown you an example.
Yes.
Exactly. But they know this one thing without theoria.
You don't know how I'm using thing. I'm using thing as the thing which possesses that relation.
I'm using the particular
The
action.
relations themselves are loosely called, if I called them things, I would just have been incorrect. I was trying to make it easy for you.
Completely fine.
But it's one substrate that possesses both of those relations. Those relations are not divided to two substances.
They didn't say about whether they're divided into two substances. My point is the things that we attribute to Christ, like the natural properties, you said you can only distinguish between natural properties in the mind alone, in theoria alone.
No. Natural properties are distinguished in the substances having those sets of properties respectively is entheoria.
Okay, so again, right, the substances having those properties, meaning the natures, you can distinguish in theoria alone. But the actual properties themselves, now you're conceding a different point, that the properties of
I've been
those
saying
natures...
this.
Okay. So these Pharisees, particularly, they would only know the properties of the nature, but they wouldn't know the nature
speaking
itself.
and I just can't hear him.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm going to leave and come back.
Back up. This has been interesting.
Hasn't been more than 5 minutes?
All right, I'm back. Just 1 second, and then I know I've been speaking for some time. So,
and then last thing, and then we're gonna go. I think it's been more than about 5 minutes. Again, give you a couple extra minutes if you'd like. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we now have that these Pharisees know the properties of the nature. They just don't know the nature. Okay. The property of being born, do you think that the Pharisees did not know that that was a human quality, that that was something of humanity?
Him being born of like the carpenter?
Yeah, being born of, not the carpenter. He wasn't born from the carpenter, but he was the carpenter's
Obviously,
son.
But in their thought.
Right, but that was not in theoria, because theoria is not just thought.
I know. I'm not telling you natural qualities are conceived and theoria.
I'm not talking about
I'm saying ascribing the natural quality. Well, I believe that the relation of being born of Mary, the relation of being born of God, still exists because of the natural qualities.
Okay, but again, the problem
because natural qualities is just a summation of all predicates in relations.
Yeah, but you already said that the nature is also the sum of all those particular things as well. Now, the problem that
I
have
I didn't say that.
Okay, let's say that you did not.
No, I didn't.
We can look at the clips back. When you say specifically that these Pharisees who do not have an enlightened soul are able to see the human properties, is there a nature that those non-enlightened people would attribute the property of being born to that isn't human?
Repeat that again?
Is there a nature...
Say that slowly.
Okay.
Because you said like not twice and I need to break that down.
Yeah. I understand. Is there a nature that the Pharisees would attribute to being born that isn't human?
They would have thought Christ is a mere man.
That's not the answer to the question, and that's not my question. My question
You're saying, is there a nature that the Pharisees would have attributed being born that is not man?
Yeah,
I'm saying they would have only conceived of him as a man.
No.
Once he answers this question, Sig, we're gonna go ahead and move on to his time.
This is the final time I'm gonna ask the question, given the fact that you're not really doing it. I'm not asking whether or not they would only have thought of Christ as a man. My question is whether or not the Pharisees would look at this property and attribute it to a nature that is not human.
No, they would attribute it only to a nature which is human.
Thank you very much. That's
because they're wrong.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
So they're able to
we're gonna go ahead and
human nature and theory without theory. Thank you. All right, you can ask my questions now, Agen.
They're just wrong, by the way, but I'll explain that in my 5 minutes.
We'll do that. Well, you're gonna get. I mean, if you want a little more time, Agen, because he got a lot of time.
I got a lot of time.
You don't have to give me exactly the same.
Okay. Schoolboy.
just to finish up
Yeah,
what was
okay.
just said.
I've got a timer going. Okay,
Alright,
The
go
Pharisees,
ahead. I paused it. I paused it.
the Pharisees only conceived of Christ being a man because they thought he was a mere man. That's just because they're ignorant. They're wrong. What they saw before them was God incarnate. So they would have applied the human properties they saw to a human nature existing on its own in their mind, which they would have thought is the man Jesus Christ, who was born of a carpenter, who wasn't born of a virgin. So they're just wrong in that sense. So that's number one. Number two, for us, we first and foremost recognize that there's one incarnate nature of the Word. The one incarnate nature of the Word has all of the relations, all of the particularity, quiddity, aseity of the two natures, but those properties aren't divided into two natures. As Nissa says, the properties no longer belong to either nature by way of division. And it's like, in his analogy, vinegar being mixed in water. So there's one nature that has a relation of being born of the Father and a relation of being born of the Son. Can I send you a quote on this, SIIG? And I want to know what you think first and foremost.
Is this a different point, or are you just trying to substantiate the other point with the Pharisees?
No, it's going to substantiate this point.
What point are you making?
I'll show you. This is from Ephraim the Syrian. So he's a famous father.
Sure thing.
And he says the following on this kind of double relation. He says right here, in hymn 4, that above showed his nature to be from the majesty, so that's one relation. And that below also showed his nature to be from mankind. Oh, great marvel that his godhead and his manhood each was preached by them. So the way
each
I
of
would read
what?
this,
Both of the natures, right?
it would be one nature. He says also that nature. So
Well, it says
the way I would read this,
So he also said,
let me just say this point so people know what I mean. The way that we would read this quote is that there's one nature. It has a relation to God the Father. It has a relation to Mary. Those are two different relations. You don't need entheoria to process that they're different relations. What you need entheoria for is to ascribe one of those relations to one of those natures and another of that relation to another nature. So now, SIIG, with this in mind, do you think that natural qualities persist in the Miaphysite formula?
that they persist. I think you
Yes.
claim. I don't really know what you. I was gonna say yeah, but I don't really know what you mean by persist.
It means they exist whether or not the mind conceives of them. They're just there in reality. They persist in the one incarnate
Okay, so
nature
you
of the
do
Word.
know what we mean by in reality, then.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you have a multivariant usage of reality. So what usage are you using for reality when you say that?
There, I'm just saying the product of the union, the one Christ that we conceive of.
So they exist in the product of the union.
Yeah. Would you agree that for Miaphysites, they have natural qualities of divinity and of humanity in reality?
I think that's what they try to say, but I don't think that really much catches out. You're just saying, do Miaphysites say X,
Okay.
Y, and Z? But the problem is,
Yes,
you
good.
need to show where the term relation is being used here. You actually have the quote here. Relation isn't used there. That's your reading, like you admitted here.
I know. I'm just saying from. The from here is a relation. Because to be from something implies there's another thing. It needs two formally constituted things.
Not necessarily. No.
But I wanna just further on get past this point. Miaphysites, you
in some
said,
sense, like, I'm
sure,
from
in
the school,
reality
doesn't
they
mean
try to
school
say
producing.
there's two sets of natural qualities. Okay.
Okay.
Do Miaphysites believe that in reality there's two natures?
Well, again, I don't think Miaphysites believe that in reality that there are two natures because they don't really understand
But-
what the definition of nature even means under Miaphysite Christology.
Okay. So if they don't affirm two natures, but they
Like,
affirm
what-
that
what do you
one
mean- what
nature
does
has
nature
all the
mean?
properties,
I just want a qualification question. What does nature mean?
an individual reality here.
So, individual reality?
Yes. So moving on with that.
So what do you mean by
Because
individual?
Miaphysites, well, by individual I mean something which can be distinguished from another of the same class.
Okay,
um,
and you distinguish by way of identity, by way of
Between what and what?
how do you distinguish an individual from another individual? Because you said it can be distinguished. How do you distinguish?
For example, if I have a man and another man, you can distinguish them by the fact that they do not have all the same properties. You can do by identity. I don't care.
Okay, but like again, if we did it,
Well,
by
let me
identity
ask
with
the question.
natures-
This is my turn.
Wait,
This is my turn.
I understand, but just like a qualification, because I understand how you're using it, and I didn't really want to straw man you.
Well,
so-
this qualification has nothing to do
said-
with my line of
no,
questioning
no,
I'm
but your
giving.
line of- but your line
I'm
of
saying, do
questioning
Miaphysites
was-
reject two natures?
Yeah, but the problem is you're trying to explicate
Okay.
what you mean by.
So if
nature, right?
Miaphysites,
I don't
If
really know what that
Miaphysites
means.
reject two natures, if Miaphysites reject two natures,
Yeah.
they say that the one nature has all the sets of properties. Would you agree, given that the nativities that you're using are relations, that it doesn't actually necessitate two natures for the Miaphysites?
Again, I don't know what you mean by nature, but you mean like some individual reality. And then when I asked what you mean by individual, you mean something that's distinguished from something else. And then I asked, what do you mean? How do you distinguish something? Because distinguishing is a particular method you
It's
use.
irrelevant. It's
I
irrelevant
don't
here.
think it's irrelevant because your predication of what nature means relies on how you distinguish things.
Dude, again, I'm the one supposed to be,
Completely
this
fine.
is my time.
Completely
I didn't
fine.
do that when you were talking.
I'm just saying it depends on what you mean. I'm not trying to be an arsehole. I'm just saying.
It really doesn't, but okay.
I think it
With
really
this in
does,
mind,
right?
Given that what you call nativities are actually relations,
Yeah.
would you concede that given the Miaphysite system of distinction and natural quality, it wouldn't necessitate two subjects of predication, i.e. natures?
Oh, subjects of predication. Now, I don't think
Yes, things that can be predicated things.
Okay, so things that can be predicated things. So, are you saying that like, can we predicate humanity of like the birth of the son from the father then? Since it's
Again, that's not my
saying-
question.
No, because you said that these are two different sets of predication, but you actually are able to
Sets of predication belong to one subject of predication.
Okay, and by subject of predication, you just mean you attribute this to this thing.
Yes.
Okay, can you attribute?
So you would attribute two relations, one to a father, one to a mother, to one nature.
Yeah. So could you attribute, for example, being born from the father as something that is human?
No, you would attribute it as something that belongs to Emmanuel.
Okay. Could you attribute that as something that belongs to the divinity?
You could attribute being born of the Virgin as something which belongs to Emmanuel.
Okay, but you couldn't attribute being born from the father as something that belongs to the divinity.
Well, there's no longer divinity and humanity counted to attribute the human stuff to the divine nature and the divine stuff to the human nature. There's
Is there
only one
still-
nature from out of both,
But there is still humanity and divinity in Christ after the union, right?
but not enumerated.
Okay, so why couldn't you predicate this thing, which is being born from the Father? Which
Again,
is
this
clearly
is
divine,
like
divinity?
detracting from my point. Right now, you're asking the questions.
I
I'm supposed to be
apologize.
asking the question.
I didn't mean to make it that sort of thing. I'm actually trying to stay on topic here, but you're saying that you
Okay.
can attribute it to these things, and I understand vaguely, I guess. But you're now saying, okay,
Okay, I'll say it in caveman words. For Miaphysites, they don't have two different properties for two things, but different properties for one thing. Do you agree that's an accurate representation of Miaphysitism?
I mean,
Remember, SIIG, only clarifiers, okay?
yeah,
Please, if you're gonna ask
sure,
questions.
sure. I will say that's indeterminate. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to say it's indeterminate. Is that okay?
According to Miaphysites.
Again, I can grant that, but I don't really know what that means for you guys.
Okay.
If it
For
helps,
us-
sure, but I don't really think it helps because
Okay, so if Miaphysites affirm- If Miaphysites affirm that it's one thing that has different sets of predication, then you can never show that different properties will ever reduce to two natures.
well, it depends.
Do you
on
agree
what,
with that statement?
Well, not necessarily, because it depends on what grants that set. Like what grants this set as one set of predication, and another set as another set of predication. If the thing that
Diverse
made
formal
this-
causes.
Okay, diverse.
That's your
formal-
clarifier.
Okay,
Not,
diverse. What
not
does
to
that
go
mean?
with that.
What does that mean?
Diverse formal causes will mean that the causes do not actually need to be duly enumerated and identified with each other, but the blueprints exist, and it would exist by virtue of the natural
Isn't that
qualities
the
here.
same as just saying the thing that you said before, but attaching a phrase to it? Because you said that you don't enumerate them, but the causes for their distinction still exist, like you said before. But you're just
Exactly.
repeating that again. But that doesn't actually mean a different reason other than what we're contesting right now. You know that.
Sorry, it doesn't mean a different thing of what we're contesting.
You're
That
not
was like
giving-
unintelligible.
That
What did you
wasn't
mean?
unintelligible. I'm saying you're not giving a different reason for why you can still have different sets of predication without the
Well,
things
because
that
it's a
granted those sets
composition.
Before. You are now just
Because
using
it's a
the term
composition.
to just describe that particular thing.
It's
which is
because
just
it's a
repeating
composition.
yourself.
So now I'm just going to
Okay, because it's a
continue. I'm just going to
composition.
continue
Okay.
explaining.
How
I'll
does a
explain the Miaphysites
composition
formula.
gener- how does a composition generate that you can still have two different sets of predication here? With
Well,
thing
I'm the
that
one asking the
predicates those
question.
Sets, then well, it's
I'm the one
clarified.
asking the questions. So now I'm gonna
Alright.
I'm gonna explain everything.
If you don't want to answer that
And then-
clarifier, it's completely up to you. It's fine.
Okay. You're gonna get the answer when I say the whole thing.
I don't think
In
so.
the
but-
Miaphysite formula, In the Miaphysite formula, you have one thing from out of two things.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing from out of two things is no longer counted as two things after the union. Because it's no longer counted as two things after the union, either that would be because both natures have become identical, or the other option is both natures have entered a henosis where there's no mingling, mixture, confusion, or tertium quid. Because we follow the latter and not the former, we would affirm that natural qualities and the diversity that used to belong to the two natures, all that diversity now belongs to one thing from out of both. And a perfect example is the body and the soul, specifically the particular body uniting with the particular soul. The particular body uniting with the particular soul composes the particular man. The particular man still maintains the diversities of the body and soul, enough so that when one contemplates the diversity, he will know that this has to be a product and not some random instantiation from a hybrid tertium quid human ousia. It's rather, this is one man from out of two particulars, and that diversity will inform the mind of division and theoria. So with this in mind, your former arguments of there being two nativities, i.e. having a relation being born of the father and having a relation being born of a mother, that doesn't force two subjects of predication, because those are predicates, and we still maintain that the predicates remain in the synthesis of the union.
Well, that's the thing.
You had a clarifying question you wanted to ask?
Well, that's the thing that's actually being disputed, right? We're trying to see whether or not you can actually generate that there's still two different sets. Well, then
you should have disputed it in your 5 minutes.
Well, I don't need to dispute it in the 5 minutes because that wasn't an argument being made yet.
Your whole argument was that because there's two nativities, there would have to be two natures.
No, my point.
Or I would have to become a monophysite.
No, my point was that if you do grant that there are two nativities, then you need to be able to grant a principle for them. Now, if the principle goes away, then that would be monophysite. But the problem is the principle that remains. Satisfy the particular.
The principle remains. The principle remains in the forms of natural quality.
But again, the forms of natural quality just mean the thing that you said before, which is the kinds of things or predicates that you're saying. So actually, that's just
all of the predicates.
That's just, again, repeating yourself. You're not giving an actual reason.
Do you think one thing can have two opposing predicates and not be two things?
So the two things themselves can still be two things, but one thing.
I didn't say two things. Can one thing have two opposing properties?
Can have two opposing properties. Yes.
Yeah. But if it's a composite. Okay, good.
Hold on.
So if one thing can have...
Am I allowed to finish the answer, or you just want to straw man the yes?
It's not a straw man.
If Agen wants to,
if he wants to cut me off completely,
you can do that,
ahead, man. If you want to cut me off,
so if one thing,
it's cool.
if one thing can have two opposing properties, then opposing properties will never force me to concede that there's two things. Do you agree with
that? By the way, Agen, really quick, you do have Schoolboy. Anytime I was gonna ask if Agen wanted just maybe 3 to 4 more minutes.
Yeah. So again, like I said, I think it's gonna depend on what causes their opposition as well, or opposing predicates. So when I'm saying that a body and soul has.
Well, it's not two things, is it?
Well, again, the body and soul are two different things, though. Now the properties of body
do they become one thing?
They constitute
4 more minutes, okay, Agen?
They can constitute one person, but they don't stop being different things even after that constitution.
Then why do the consensus of the fathers say it's two hypostases making one hypostasis and two natures making one nature?
We're not talking about necessarily the consensus right now. What we're talking
about
right now,
I am.
Not necessarily.
Everything I said is from the fathers.
You specifically rendered a particular philosophical point, and I want to attack the philosophical point, and then we can go to the patristics, because that's what you're trying to say.
Okay, but you don't attack. So, I asked the questions. I asked you a question. Can one thing have two opposing properties? Hold on.
Instead of addressing
it's my turn to talk.
Hold on, SIIIG. Wait.
All right.
I was being very polite. If you agree that one thing can have two opposing properties and it doesn't have to regress into two things, and then you're arguing, well, actually, it needs the foundation of those two things, then it can't be the case because something is either one thing or two things. However, if you wanted to argue it's one thing in one sense, two things in another, that just violates the patristic consensus because they believe that man is one from two and is no longer two.
But again, that's
Cyril says that he's no longer two in the second letter to Sixcensus.
I know the second letter to Sixcensus, but I also know the letters that he actually had in his correspondence with John of Antioch. But we're not arguing patristic for patristic.
Okay, and in his writing to John of Antioch, Nestorius thought it was monophysite, and even in letter 44. I know. And in letter 44, he says that it's in division. So again, based on the fathers, they actually say that the body and soul, when they unite, they're no longer two.
It depends on if John of Antioch's language is actually fine Christologically, isn't it?
Okay, I'll talk about John of Antioch. John of Antioch, according to letter 44, Cyril says they affirm one nature, but they're obscure about their sayings, and they know that the division is in speculation and theoria alone. Okay, he says that in letter 44.
Given the fact that John of Antioch's language is very much accepted by Cyril, and the particular semantic conditions are accepted as well, there would be no problem in saying that there are two natures after the union, given the particular
Nope,
conditions.
because John of Antioch never says two natures after the
there's
union.
no problem with saying two natures after the union, therefore.
No, there is. There's a problem with saying
you're
two
going
natures
to
after the union.
contest
John of Antioch.
Of course you are.
John of Antioch only says there's two natures, and for Cyril in letter 44, he says that
Actually,
they
we can
mean it's
pull
in
up
reason
letter-
and speculation alone.
I would actually like to contest that if you may. We can actually pull up letter 44 as well as the particular affidavit.
Well, we
was
can do
signed.
that. We
Right,
can do
yeah.
that, sure, but it's my time, and I'd like to get this point clear.
You'd like to not pull up the letter.
Cyril
of course. Go ahead.
says, "No, I'll let you, but let me do with my time as I please."
Yeah, I'm just saying
So
you're not going to put it up.
because you agree that one thing can have two sets of properties, your argument that there's two sets of properties,
That's
therefore
not
there's
exactly
two things,
what I said. That's a straw man.
fails because the body and soul are no longer two.
Agen, that's a straw
So because
man.
we know that
That's
the
not
body
exactly
and soul,
what
because we know that the body and soul are no longer two, and you conceded one
Did not
thing can have
concede.
two properties, and because the fathers say there's no longer two natures after the union in Christ, therefore your argument from nativities will not make me in any way concede diophysitism after the
Hey,
union.
Sorry,
Agen,
but
you
that's
have
not
2
the
minutes.
particular point
2
that I
minutes left,
actually
Agen.
raised. So I
Okay.
actually said that it depends
I
on
challenge
what
Sig now.
grounds
It's
of
your turn
distinction.
because you wanted to bring the letter.
All right.
Show me in one place, Sig, in letter 39, where John of Antioch says two natures after the union.
Since
Does
we're
it
going
exist?
to use on the particular terms, I'm also going to challenge you on all the other times before where I asked for the particular usage where you failed to do so. With the
Bingo.
John of Antioch
Are you
thing-
sure you want me to do that? You want me to go into the fathers?
Hold on.
You want me to go into the
I want
fathers?
you to specifically
It'll be your
show
nightmare.
whether or not when we looked at Leo when he said he but he in
Wait,
his
whoa,
own, that
whoa,
meant that.
mods.
Now, when it comes
Mods.
now you're
I
into
did-
the mods. That's fine.
Yo.
I just wanted to clarify my
Guys,
point.
I
Yes,
just paused the
yes.
times. Everyone,
You have a
guys, hold on.
Whoa.
I have to pause this really quick. All right, you got a minute. You got a minute and 45, Agen. Sig, you can get into this right after all of this, okay? All the contentions, everything you want to go to, that's fine. Let Agen finish, okay? What he wants to
Okay.
do, and if he wants
So
you
to
to
make
pull up
this point-
something, then pull something up.
So
Okay.
So to make this point
Yeah.
very clear, because Sig conceded
I
that
did
one
not
thing can have
concede.
two opposing properties.
and I said it
You
depends.
did say that, but
no,
because-
what I actually said was
because
before
you
cut me
said-
off, it depends on
Hold
what
on, I'm talking, bro.
grounds that set. what
I'm talking.
grounds that
I
set,
didn't ask
brother.
you a question yet.
So go ahead.
I
If
didn't
you
ask
want
you
to
a
say
question.
something, go ahead.
Sig, let him go. Sig, let him go. You're gonna get your moment right after this, okay?
All good.
Yes. Because you said that one thing has two sets of opposing properties, and because the fathers make it clear that the body and soul are no longer two, then your argument from two sets of opposing properties does not reduce to diophysitism, because the foundation would be in natural quality, and Cyril says the only distinction that remains after the union is in natural quality. So with this in mind, because you wanted to go to John of Antioch to try and show that two natures after the union is accepted, can you please show me in letter 39 where the statement two natures after the union is said?
All right. That's going to be contingent again upon the actual concession, which was not made. My concession was never on
So
whether
do you
or not
have
you
the
can
quote?
have two different sets of properties. My actual
I didn't
point,
ask you that
which wasn't a
question.
concession. Again, I'm answering you.
I didn't ask you that
my
question.
answer again. Me bringing up the quote is going to be dependent on. Whether or
I
not
didn't
made a
ask you that
concession.
question.
That's okay. Again.
So do you have the quote or
making
not?
The point. Me making the quote is going to be dependent on what I actually said. Is it not?
Okay, so you don't have the quote.
Okay. No. Again, I have the quote relative to the point that I made, not relative on the straw man you tried to employ. My particular
I
didn't
point
employ
was
a
that
straw.
it depends
Okay.
on the kind of
All right,
thing that
guys.
grounds the distinction.
Time. All right, time. All right. Schoolboy, do you want to time this 10 minutes, bro, or no?
Can we make it
I
like
mean, that
5?
was
Because
pretty-
I'm getting super sleepy.
Yeah, man. We can make it 5 if that's okay. You want to do 5-minute cross, or what do you guys want to do?
It's fine.
Is that okay? All right. I'm gonna go ahead. Listen, guys, during this cross, please, just answer as concisely as you can, and please let's not do what we did this time. All right. No making points. Answer questions. You can be interrupted. All right. You can ask.
So who's gonna
clarifiers
ask
and
the
that's it.
questions?
It's gonna be Sig. Sig will have 5, and then you'll end off on 5. All right, Agen, is that okay?
This is just gonna do what we just did.
see.
Why not just end with conclusions?
You want to end
Actually-
conclusions?
Yeah, fine. Agen, you can go first, and then I'll go after.
Okay.
Well, I just
all right.
went. It's only fair you should go.
No, it's fine. I think you should go since you want to continue speaking. Go ahead, Agen.
No,
guys
you
like-
want the last word, but you
Well,
went.
sure
I
thing.
went. It's only you should
I
go
want the
now.
last word.
All right, how
Now
about
what?
this,
Go ahead.
guys? Rock, paper, scissors. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. How
All
are we
right,
gonna do rock paper scissors?
Right, you're gonna DM me right now your answer. Go. DM me.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
DM you. I'm gonna DM you.
Agen,
Just
pick a number 1 to 10.
And damn it to you, or just say it
Whoever.
now.
Whoever.
Just say it.
Just say it.
Okay. 3.
Nope. Sig,
What? 7.
All right, SIIG was closer. It was 6.
All right.
All right, go ahead, Agen.
Okay. Based on what we spoke about, he tried to make the argument in this last part. Or should I? Sorry, pause. Should we talk about everything we said in the past 3 hours, or what we said in the past 10 minutes?
He's been absolutely
everything that you guys, whatever you want to conclude, man. This is your conclusion to this whole entire dialogue with SIIG. All right. So whatever you want to put in there is fine. Go ahead.
He's absolutely done the defender there.
Okay. Well,
He's
first
been
of all, thank you,
absolutely
SIIG, for
done
coming. We had a lot of discussions. We first started speaking about me citing the fathers, and you wanted to argue that I was being disingenuous. But then we started talking a little bit about metaphysics, and this is when it started to get interesting. First, you tried to argue either I collapse into monophysitism, or I actually have to affirm the existence of two essences, and then via some sort of counting method affirm two essences. But I proved this is not the case because of homogeneous hypostases and heterogeneous hypostases, and then it devolved into a language debate. But to define that once again, homogeneous hypostases are those which are instantiated immediately from some type of universal. Heterogeneous hypostases, their genesis comes from a product of a union of two hypostases. So one, it's priorly made from an essence instantiating. The other is priorly made from two hypostases combining. With this in mind, you can speak and count ousia for homogeneous hypostases. But once you have a heterogeneous hypostases, you cannot speak of Christ being into ousia, Christ having two ousia, Christ being two ousia after the union, because it'll say something we don't want to say about Christ if you understand the genus-species subdivision relation and how that applies to universals. What we can say is that Christ has a human ousia. We can say that Christ has a divine ousia because we're pointing to the essential relation which the particular has, because he still possesses two sets of natural qualities, and because of that will possess all that belongs to those natures, however in negation to counting them. We also have clear patristic testimony by the co-presider of the Council of Ephesus telling you not to count essences. We have Saint Theodoros of Ancyra in his exposition on the Creed saying not to speak of two or diverse essences in Christ, because doing so would make Christ no longer one Lord. And he's trying to argue based off the speaking of the Council of Nicaea. They only spoke of him having a human ousia, but they never said Christ is two ousia, because that's never, ever found anywhere in the Fathers. With this in mind, after me and SIIG had that discussion, we talked a little bit about what is the foundation for Christ retaining consubstantiality,
making my mic louder
which I said
YouTube.
is the natural quality which remains from the combination of two particulars. And then it evolved into SIIG basically admitting that God the Word has all the human properties intrinsically.
Yeah, let me see if
and
that...
he conceded this very
good,
clearly and very
good.
loudly. And when he conceded that point, I tried to press him on the fact that God gained something which he didn't have before, which he also agreed on recording. He might say he didn't say this.
No, bro, it just has two sets, but actually set
if anyone wants it, I mean, you don't believe me, I can probably send it over. After that, however, SIIG wanted to kind of retract, say, you don't know how to define change. SIIG did that all throughout the debate. He kept asking me to define, especially after I've defined. He would ask me to define the definitions I gave themselves.
Should I equal throughout early this morning? Yes.
Is flux to change, and this property belongs to the Word. But then he wanted to say that is actually the nature, not to the person. To which I made a counter rebuttal that the person does things, not the natures, and he conceded this. With this in mind,
it's not what happened.
Whoa! To another point would have to be properly and intrinsically predicated to the person, and the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises that SIIG would have conceded that God the Word intrinsically changes via a spatial change by possessing the constitutive idioms that are both hypostatic and essential.
He's doing it again. He's jargonizing. This is insane.
Which is what you have when you affirm anhypostatization in the Chalcedonian model. After this, we started talking about the Nestorianism in the Tome of Leo. And you have SIIG basically agreeing at first that there is two he's in the Tome of Leo in letter 28. He said that one refers to the person, the other refers to the nature.
Guys,
and then he tried to argue that he could support this by the prior passages. He then tries to retract and saying he was talking about letter 54, which I gave him a translation from Grillmeyer.
That's not what happened. You said the opposite happened. Oh my days, what the hell?
Passages in the Tome. So he made a blunder, then retracted.
Well,
actually the Tome doesn't have two he's because said doesn't constitute those two he's.
No, that's what I said the entire time.
In the sermon which I gave, sermon 54, and then tried to argue one refers to person, one refers to nature, to which I showed the anathemas of St. Cyril, showing that the worst thing you can say, which results from saying that God works in a man and wrought glory around him, is that there is a he other than he. If this is the case, then Leo necessarily follows under the anathema of Cyril. You can try to argue that Cyril is arguing against two persons, and he would appeal to the Tome itself.
Bro, he's
the 12 anathemas
someone clip this to show him
Cyril
lying.
Only ever thinks that two persons is a result of speaking of two hypostases, which Nestorius affirms. And even Cyril affirms two hypostases in the 12 anathemas, and Marius Mercator's translation will have it as
no. We have all this recorded,
Leo. So the context of the 12 anathemas is referring to a natural union, tells you not to divide the hypostases, which are individual substances, and then that surrounding context would show that the anathema that is wrought against Nestorius is a condemnation of two individual substances, both known as he. After this,
Yo, I'm
Sig
gonna
tried to make an
review my
argument
own debate.
that you
This is
have
gonna be insane.
two nativities, which I define as relations, and then he tried to say this would result in two things in Christ, to which I showed one thing can have two opposing things and is no longer counted as two after the union, and the foundation exists still in natural qualities. Therefore, Christ is one. Nothing can ever be shown to make him two. All he can do is try to argue against the things which I already explained, and all he can do is try and retract and say,
All right.
well, I misspoke, or you're trying to catch me.
And time. All right. Thank you, Agen. Sig, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, glory to Jesus Christ, everybody. What we've seen here is an absolute masterclass on what basically goes on with most Oriental Orthodox discussions. When we talk particularly about the natures of Christ and the person of Christ, the most important thing is making sure that we're not speaking past each other when we're talking about the things that we're talking about. On TikTok, we talked about the fact that in his video, his most famous video, or one of his most famous videos, Agen directly put the idea that he is going to show that the fathers of the church taught metaphysitism, or his particular instantiation of the doctrine. With that being said, he not only quoted people that were seen as heretics, but people whose existence as saints are dubious in the Orthodox Church. People actually who don't even exist in any martyrology whatsoever. Yet he still cited them to make a particular point. He quoted forgery after forgery without demonstrating the particular ideals for those forgeries, other than the fact that other people did not include them in certain renditions of their particular translations. So not only did he, under the scholarly sense, quote forgeries, but he also misled his particular followers when making particular videos showing that the church fathers taught this. Not only did he quote people that didn't exist, he even quoted people that weren't authorities for the church whatsoever, going from poets to condemned theologians themselves. Now, to continue on that road, we then got into a conversation on whether or not there is actually something that can ground the particular properties that Jesus Christ, Son of God, has. Wasn't really able to demonstrate that. I kept asking for clarifications, and it got to the point that he started jargonizing. And we understand that when someone does jargonize, there is an issue with how they're able to explicate the points that they are saying. Now, when I asked him to clarify his particular points, he would then give a definition, and I would then use the definition he gave, and he would then disagree with that. Now, after disagreeing with the particular definition, he got a little bit frustrated, but we tried to calm things down. There was a bunch of pushback, and I tried my best to keep things on topic by trying to hound the points home. However, there was then a mention on the notion of change because I use very selectively the word intrinsic. That the person of the word intrinsically has the human nature, which means that it is proper to the usage and identity of the particular person of the word insofar as the way that he relates back to that humanity that he has. Now, Agen, instead of employing the definition and usage that I gave and the scheme that I provided, he tried to import a particular definition from some other imported system that in no way actually has relation to the Oriental Orthodox Church, but rather he chooses to use the phrase whenever he wants. After Steelman, he tried to not actually address the fact that I was critiquing the Steelmans of his arguments. I then was able to critique him philosophically even after this and demonstrate the fact that change in no way is actually attributed to God the Word because he isn't even able to give a proper account of change outside of a Google definition. That being said, we then tried to look at whether the tome of Leo was an Nestorian tome. After 15 minutes of him trying to lambast me on this particular point, he then tried to show Nestorianism in Leo's tome and failed miserably. He tried to show three particular texts. One was from the tome. One was actually Grillmeyer's version of a letter that Leo wrote, and the other one was a citation of one of the 12 anathemas that he selectively chose in translation from Reverend Pusey, who was a Protestant and thus have no particular authentication on the way in which you translate texts. Even in our tradition, we understand that you should only use translations that have been approved by the church, or even in discussions that we actually have a cursory knowledge of the particular language. Now, That being said, he tried to move away from philosophy and tried to only stick to his idea of the fathers. But when
1 minute.
critiquing the particular idea of the fathers, he again was unable to demonstrate what he was actually talking about. And this all comes to a head when we actually talk about what went on with John of Antioch's conference. He did cite Cyril of Alexandria, but then we cited John of Antioch, who Cyril specifically says when he's talking about the two natures after the union and with no reference to Theoria in this particular passage, he specifically says that what John of Antioch says is great. And then I asked him whether or not the nativities themselves, the nativity of God the Word as a baby, could be known by people that didn't have an enlightened nous, which would mean that they're able to distinguish that from what it would mean to be a divine birth, which Jews were already contemplating with at the time of wrestling with, see the Zohar for more. They were able to, according to Agen, which means without Theoria, there were people that were able to distinguish between the humanity of Christ and what it means to have the divinity of God. That is something that cannot be held. But then he said, well, the Pharisees were just wrong. That is the crux of his argument. These guys, they're wrong. But ultimately, it demonstrates that even via the wrongness of these particular points, we can demonstrate that without Theoria, without your nous being enlightened, without the light of the eye of your soul being enlightened, you can actually distinguish between two things in reality that's still under one particular subject.
And
thank you.
Time. Yep. All right, gentlemen. Thank you to both of you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having
VC.
me.
Thank you for having me. I'll be in VC here if you guys want to talk.
Absolutely, man. Agen, God bless you, man. And
God bless you. Thank you for having me, bro.
Absolutely.
Later,
man.
guys.
Later.
And SIIIG, if you want to talk to me later, you know my server, discord.gg/orthodox. If you want to come.
Well, you're already here, so we can just talk here more. Right?
We can. I'm
Stick
just
around.
leaving that invite.
I'm
stick
in like so many servers, so I'm not really in the mood of joining. So I
Me
appreciate
too.
you being here.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Well, you're already here,
Yeah,
so we can just
Agen-
talk here.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Stick around, brother. It's a cool
Yeah,
server.
stick around, man.
All right. I'll think about it. I got to think about it.
All right.
All right. All right, man.
All right. Later,
Awesome.
guys. Have a good one.
God bless.
God bless. All right.
I'm closing the stage.
All right. Everyone go
We
to
can
general
go
chat.
VC.
All right. I'm still
All right.
live, by the way, so. Guys, that was their king. That was their Maharaga, bro. That was Maharaga, bro. Insane. That was... Yo.
Agen. Yo, Agen.
Yo, what's up?
Yo, sick.
Agen
Yo, I'm still
Akbar.
live, by the way.
Hey man, just wanted to ask you,
What's
like,
up, YouTube?
We'll
Yo.
talk for 3 hours straight about nonsense. Oh my!
what do you think about like the argument where you could just ask them if Christ has two ontologies? Would that like maybe be
No, because
a
they
more
won't say that there's another ontology, because they're going to question
Here's
what you
here's
mean
the
by it.
here's the problem when it comes to Christology debates, and I understand why you had such a hard time just trudging through the semantic portion of that debate.
I had to do it, though.
Because, yeah, you do, because the crux of it comes down to, at some point, because they have a system that is internally coherent for their Christology.
All right. I'm ending the
You
stream
have
now,
to
guys. God
define
bless
all
you.
the terminology, all the metaphysics, the